Good. There's a bit of housekeeping to begin. So good afternoon and welcome to the Natural Infrastructure and Growth Scrutiny Panel. Before we start these proceedings, may I bring to your attention some housekeeping matters? There is no expected fire alarm testing today. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please follow the signs to the nearest fire exit and meet at the fire assembly point in Civic Square. Please, can I ask you, as we're used to using your microphones when you're talking, your mobile devices are turned off, so we have your full attention. As you know, this meeting will be broadcast live, and then it can be watched many, many times on YouTube, and that you consent to doing this. There's another interesting little point here on housekeeping. There is a referendum. People are voting in a referendum next week, so we need to follow the protocol set out in the published pre-referendum guidance. So basically, if you start talking about the mayor referendum, the video will be stopped. So just try not to get into that. So avoid mentioning the subject, basically. Any queries relating to this, direct them to the monitoring officer. Thank you. Obviously, we have had a bit of a change of circumstances on the council, and I'm honoured to be the chair of this panel. We should just enjoy these hours we have together today and beyond, and just go for it. Do our best, ultimately, to hold the administration to account, but also be productive and helpful at the same time. It's striking that balance, but I'm all for free speech, as you know. So, apologies, Hannah.
Through you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Sarah Allen, and we've got Councillor Bill Stevens joining us. And I've asked my colleague just to give Councillor Darcy a call to see if he's on his way.
Okay. Declarations of interest. Councillor Alison Rainsford.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to your new role. Yes, I have to declare it's already registered the interest, and it's in the item on the housing.
Most other items, you'll have your own, obviously, declarations on the Plymouth City Council website, so it's all there on public record. Minutes from the last meeting? Oh. Is your microphone on, Jeremy? Couldn't see the red light, Jeremy.
It's not working, Chair.
So that you have the Vice Chancellor of the University of Plymouth. So I'm a employee of the University of Plymouth. So that's a personal interest.
Thank you, Councillor Osman. Anything else? How are we looking on the minutes, Hannah?
If the panel are happy to approve them.
All happy? Brilliant, thank you. We'll sign them off. We thank Councillor Ian Darcy for his efforts last year, just if that could be noted. I'm sure he will add value when he gets here. So, I don't have any urgent business. I just want to make sure we have a good session this afternoon. And our first item is Plan for Homes. If you can take us away, guys, that would be great.
Thank you, Chair, and congratulations on your appointment. We first let a little bit of background, then some reflection and a little bit about monitoring. So we first launched the Plan for Homes programme as our housing delivery framework for Plymouth in November 2013. Since then, in excess of 1,100 new homes have been built on surplus council-owned sites under the Plan for Homes banner, of which a staggering 64% have been affordable. Plan for Homes 4 was launched in March 2024 maintaining our overall ambition to deliver a minimum of 5,000 new homes in the city over 5 years. Today, we're providing a progress report to Scrutiny against our action plan priorities and key performance indicators. When developing Plan for Homes 4, my vision was for it to be a more holistic plan than the previous three, an all-housing approach, if you will, with a more comprehensive programme of initiatives across the wider housing agenda. I wanted it to better respond to the various housing needs and challenges that we face. Building more homes for both social and affordable home ownership is a corporate priority. The Plan for Homes 4 is not just about increasing the supply of new and affordable homes. It's about driving a high-quality private rented sector to provide decent, safe and secure homes and bringing empty properties back into occupation. It's about improving the condition and energy efficiency of existing homes of all tenures, retrofitting energy measures and delivering more low-carbon new homes. It's about providing home adaptations to support residents to live independently and safely in their homes. It's about supporting estate regeneration and renewal to replace obsolete housing. It's about joint working to significantly increase the number of homes in the city centre, recognising that housing is the missing piece of the jigsaw in our plans for the transformation of our city centre. It's about reducing homelessness and its impact and the use of temporary accommodation, whilst providing a range of affordable housing, including supported and specialist accommodation. It's about partnership working and maximising inward investment into homes in the city. Because of the range of all of that, we've actually got officers from across a variety of departments, because this doesn't just sit in one place, because it's about understanding all of the needs and challenges that we face as a city in tackling all of our housing needs and having a robust plan to respond to them, which can continue to innovate and can flexibly respond to new circumstances. The UK remains in the midst of a housing crisis, and Plymouth, like many towns and cities across the country, is feeling that pressure. Nationally and locally, homelessness has increased significantly over recent years. When developing Plan for Homes 4, we were experiencing record high numbers of families living in temporary accommodation, including bed and breakfast accommodation. I'm really pleased that in the first year, we've reduced the families in bed and breakfast accommodation by 66%, which is an example of what this is delivering for us. But the face of homelessness is changing. No longer is homelessness just about rough sleeping or our traditional picture of a beggar that you would quite often see portrayed in lots of places. It's about ordinary people not being able to afford housing because they've been priced out of the market and into temporary accommodation. And housing demands resulting from Section 21 evictions, household breakup and violence against women and girls are significant. There are currently more than 8,000 households in this city who continue to wait for the chance to find a decent home that they can rent at a genuinely affordable price. And having a secure place to call home is about so much more than just a roof over your head. It impacts on the health and well-being of all those affected, so we've got to improve the lives of those people here in Plymouth. On top of this, new private sector housing building is not only in decline, it's been in total free fall in the city, with many factors combining on that, but results in a housing market failure to maintain not only an adequate supply of new homes, but also almost any supply of new homes, that's resulting in a large number of properties with permissions not being built out. We are working hard, and despite all of this, have seen some significant achievements in the first 12 months. We've been working with our delivery partners on all of that, and it's hard to pick highlights out. So I'm not going to go through and crow about the massive list in the report. I'll leave that for you to talk about and question as appropriate, because this is about looking forward as well as looking back. And we continue to need to do more given the scale of the housing crisis. And we've got a wide range of actions that we describe in the report. I just wanted to highlight some of those. We're developing a pipeline of sites for future delivery in response to the significant downward trend in market housing delivery. We're preparing a market recovery plan with planning and housing solutions to unlock allocated and stalled sites. We're working with the Plymouth Housing Development Partnership and Homes England to maximise the Labour government's doubling of funding for affordable housing. So that's £39 billion available over the next 10 years. Nationally, we want to make sure we get the most of that into Plymouth that we can. Engaging with investors and developers to establish a build-to-rent offer in Plymouth to support and capitalise on the government's long-term investment in the dockyard. And we're preparing for the forthcoming introduction of the Renters' Rights Bill, which represents the most significant legislative reform in decades, ensuring that the services that we have here in the city are effectively aligned to meet the evolving needs of the sector. In concluding, I would like to talk a bit about monitoring and scrutiny, because both of that is important within this field. Our action plan reports on progress across our 10 initiatives and all our priority housing actions. Each has been RAG rated and has got annotation in terms of where we are at to help you in your deliberations. Our key performance indicators pick up on a suite of indicators across homelessness, new homes and housing standards. The Housing Task Force that I've jointly chaired over the last 2 years with our Chief Executive to get to this point will continue to meet quarterly, jointly chaired now by myself and our new Director of Growth, to review progress and develop new actions that will be required to respond to future challenges and opportunities. And this is all part of informing the work of that Housing Task Force. We bring an annual report on Plan for Homes 4 overall to the Scrutiny Committee at this Scrutiny Committee at this point in the year. In the spring and autumn cycles, we take the homelessness element at a deep dive to the Housing and Communities Scrutiny Committee in agreement with our commitments to the council on that. And I would like to assure members that there is no let up from us. We're continually looking at what we can do to meet the housing crisis, not only the country faces, but especially what this city faces, and what we can do within our power to tackle that, because our ambition and commitment to the people of Plymouth having good quality housing, no matter at what price point or at what tenure, remains undiminished. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other contributions from the panel? Any questions? Councillor Clay?
Thank you, Chair. I guess I'm context setting ahead of the question, if that's okay. So in the report, which is really detailed, and I had a fantastic time reading it, thank you, 17,000 homes in Plymouth are in fuel poverty, and according to the big issue last year, we had the dampest and mouldiest homes in the UK, in Plymouth. I've seen the report that we'll be insulating 206 homes under the Warm Homes Local Grant. To me, home insulation is one of those rare triple wins. It brings down bills, it improves health, and it supports net zero. And actually there's a fourth win in there because it also supports jobs locally as well. So to me, it's a no-brainer that we need to be doing more of it. But what are we doing to make that case to government?
We're continually making the case, and actually it's not just retrofitting, there's lots of smaller bits as well. So whilst I'll hand over to John on the technicalities of the retrofit and all the work that we're doing there, I think it would also be fair to say that things like our emergency welfare fund is targeting the small interventions that can be made, because actually it's not always the big things. We can do some big things on the small stuff. We fund PEC to get involved in that and have helped PEC secure funding to do those pieces of work. And in fact, earlier, just a couple of months ago with PEC, I met the Select Committee Chair to talk about the work that PEC was doing, not only on renewables, but how that profit from renewables is being recycled to do those sorts of things in the city. So we are actively engaging at ministerial level as well as at Select Committee level, and not just in the housing market. We're doing it across all areas of government where there might be a need. So just to give you a sense of, it's not just in this bid that we're addressing that. The retrofit of homes is the big issue. We have a massive housing stock in need of retrofit. A lot of that is in the private rented sector. So it's not just us as a council supporting homeowners, it's us supporting business owners who are not actually living in their own premises. So not necessarily all interested in getting it resolved yet. The Renters' Rights Bill will give us a lot more access to provide some sticks to that sector, because actually quite often it's the sticks that are necessary. So those are the big picture, but if I hand over to John, he can talk to you about what we've been doing and the sort of demand that's out there for the funding that we're chasing.
Yeah, so we have been successful in securing about £3 million to retrofit approximately 206 homes across the city over a 3-year programme. We had applied for over 3 times that amount, but because government funds were limited to about £500 million for this part of the programme, it was across the board, across the whole country, where there was a reduction to just less than a third of what local authorities were asking for. So we are keen and able to deliver far more if we obtain more funding, and we have been speaking to government about obtaining that funding. I think we've shown that we've been successful at delivering well on previous programmes. So you can see from the Home Upgrade Grant Fund for last year, in year 1 of our programme, we actually delivered more than we forecast we would. So in year 1 of a 3-year programme, we've delivered 234 homes retrofitted out of 500 for the 3 years. So I think we're doing reasonably well now, and government recognises that. So I think we're in a good position to secure more funding if there's more becomes available.
Oh, sorry, Neil's got ahead of me. I'll let Neil go.
I think it's worth adding that Plan for Homes also covers estate regeneration. So Initiative 8 on the action plan goes into the benefits of the regeneration that's recently completed at North Prospect, with 1,100 homes, cold and damp, that were replaced. 800 demolitions replaced with 1,100 homes. And also in Barton, housing association properties and the Savage Road area have been demolished and replaced by 300 new homes by Clarion Housing and Sanctuary Housing, all of which contributing to reduction in the number of damp and cold properties in the city.
Oh, works. We work very, very closely also with registered providers in the city, so housing associations that have got significant stock in Plymouth. A lot of our conversation with our registered providers is about delivery of new affordable housing and supported and specialist housing in the city. But increasingly, there are conversations around their increased investment on their existing stock as well. So there's a recognition now that they've got statutory duty, high-profile cases recently about the social housing stock needing to deal with issues of damp, mould within that stock. And so we're seeing local RPs channel significant amount of funding themselves into rectifying that issue themselves as well.
Thank you. Council, she would let me know if she wanted a supplementary, wouldn't you? Josh McCartney, Councillor Josh McCartney.
Thanks, Chair. Really great to hear from you all today. I think, we've heard in recent scrutiny, conversation around the city centre company, around this need for housing in the city, the impact that could have on culture. We've also heard from South West Water and a range of different bodies that will operate utilities associated with this development. And I guess my question would be, I understand the conversations there, and this goes beyond the joint local plan. But where are you at with that dialogue around provision for services? So, additional loading of 5,000 homes in the centre on sewerage, on, Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue, all the different service providers and utilities that will be using that. Because I guess that's one of those concerns that, we've got a lot of demand already. So how are they all going to accommodate that?
If I kick off, I think Paul will probably pick up on that after. We know that if you look at a city of our size and the city centre, you go into the middle of Manchester, what you see, high density accommodation, especially for people who haven't got families, who don't necessarily want to live in suburbia, and thousands of homes. And you look at our city centre, which was designed post-war as a business district, a business and retail district. So we have a large land mass with almost no population, bizarrely in the most densely populated ward in the city, which says something about the population density elsewhere. we need to, therefore, just as a practicality, say this is a brownfield site, what do we do with it? We're not just saying, oh, well, let's just build ad hoc. The deal with Homes England is about master planning, and that means working with everyone else. We have put in a bid on the New Towns Commission, which is why Councillor Rainsford made her personal declaration earlier. So we were not going to go into the detail of the bid because we're still waiting to hear. But that is also about master planning. So that you're saying, well, to get this number of homes in, what does that mean? Not only for sewage and power and fire and rescue, but for dentists and doctors and schools and amenity space, and what does massing look like, and what sort of housing mix do you put here? And if we get that housing mix here, what does that do to other parts of the city? So it's a big question. And at the moment, we're in that stage of doing that work of putting together the frameworks. It would be fair to say, you know, if you've been around the Good Companion site, you'll have spotted that Homes England have already put up that they bought that site. There has been, and we've made no secret that we've been doing some land assembly down at the bottom end of town. So there has been some land assembly going on so that we've got some sites as soon as that's ready to go. But we are starting with, let's do the planning to make sure everything's fit for purpose. And some of the work that's been done on city centre infrastructure is around handling some of that surface water, stopping sewers being over flooded, and also looking at preparation of amenity space that will be needed when there are more people living in the city centre, and to support the city centre regeneration in having amenity space that better meets the needs of a 24-hour city rather than a 9 to 5 city centre, because that's about space and lighting and security and all sorts of things. So it's not just, oh, there's an empty spot, let's put another tower block on, but actually let's do some careful planning behind it. So from that's where we're at the big picture. Paul, you might want to sort of fill in on where those discussions are up to in more detail.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, just building upon what you said, at a strategic level, we've produced something called the Infrastructure Needs Assessment, which is the sort of baseline position for the entire local plan. So there's an infrastructure needs assessment for the current local plan and the 117 housing sites that are included within that. So when it comes to looking at the future, including looking at the city centre, we'll need to update that infrastructure needs assessment. In addition to that, we, as part of a broader approach to placemaking, we look at opportunities to improve infrastructure as we go along. So an example of that would be Armada Way with the sustainable urban drainage system, which is going to divert over 70% of the water from the combined sewage system, allowing a couple of sites that that are being looked at the moment in terms of that master planning of the city centre to be literally plugged into that. And therefore, that will not be a constraint on those sites coming forward for mixed-use development and housing. And then over and above that, we have a series of what we call strategic liaison meetings with the Environment Agency, with South West Water, with other utility providers to better align a multiplicity of different business models that they have to work through their regulators to our local planning process, so that we can actually align those infrastructure requirements to the local plan. So it sort of works at a strategic, a sort of city centre wide project level, but also in close liaison with those various utilities that are crucial to making a place somewhere where people want to live.
Quick supplementary. That's really good to hear and really reassuring. You know, I've stood on the waterfront with Chris looking at the water, and you know, it's something that's quite important to a lot of residents in the city. So the fact that the SUDs are going to take away that much surface runoff is absolutely fantastic. I guess my supplementary would be around, you know, we've seen the announcement around Babcock moving into the city centre, and you know, I guess a knee-jerk reaction from many has been, where are they all going to park? Where are these people all going to park? Open question.
That's why we're master planning, and it's why master planning is really important here. If we talk about a new town in the city centre, that's not just the inner city ring road, it's the arterial routes and others. It's about what does that mean for public transport, which is actually something that could meet lots of people's needs, not just people living in the city centre. The city centre is the hub at that. So if we improve transport into a new town in the city centre, we improve transport to all parts of Plymouth where people will want to interconnect to, because sustainable transport needs to be part of that. When you look at cities that have intensely or intensified their city and town centres. You go to places like Salford, transport has been a really key part of that. Salford has turned from being Manchester's car park to being a vibrant town and city centre of its own, without hindering Manchester's development at the same time. So this is about the importance of that master planning, and at the moment we're not yet at the consultation stages. All of this, once it begins to be worked up, will be subject to lots and lots of consultation at big stage. The new local plan will have to cover that as well, but we'll be doing it within the context of the city centre, so that people get a sense of what does that mean. It'd be fair to say that there are sites in the city centre already with planning permission for housing where there is not one car parking space allocated. So there is already a planning sort of precedent for that. The city centre is connected during office hours well on bus routes. And Babcock's wouldn't be making that announcement if they didn't think that they were able to service their office needs. And we're all looking forward to that happening. But we want a mixed use city centre. And that's not only people living there, that's people working there, and not only in retail and hospitality and entertainment, but in real jobs that mean that people are spending the money in those other establishments. So it is the complexity of how do you do that. And it's not a new Cranbrook that creates something from scratch. It's how do we build that into a city that has regenerated many, many times over many centuries, and this will be the next iteration of that.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm aware we've got a few questions, myself included. We want to carry this on, but if we can be succinct, that would be great. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Really enjoyed reading this report. I just want to ask a couple of questions about HMOs and HMO licensing in the city. Really great to see that the sort of inspections that have been carried out have led to almost half of our licensed HMOs being improved and those standards being increased. But, I represent Mutley Plain and a lot of the houses around Mutley Plain that are obviously HMOs, and HMOs are 3 people and upwards, whereas mandatory HMO licensing is only 5 people and upwards. So have we looked into the possibility of extending HMO licensing to 3 people and upwards, because that is something that local authorities can do? And has there been an assessment made of how many HMOs we have that are not licensed who could possibly benefit from having an HMO license too?
I'll pass on to Matt in a moment. I represent Speed for the Waterfront, which has high densities of HMOs across the entire ward, and actually those that aren't HMOs are quite often conversions into flats, so we've got hardly any full houses in our ward. So I know the problems as well. I think what's really interesting is that the Renters' Rights Bill is totally changing the way that landlords will have to work. So there's going to be a licence for all rented properties. And I think that begins to change the nature of our inspection regimes. So although we've got limited on HMOs, what we have under renters' rights is an ability to intervene in all of the private rented sector. And that will mean not only HMOs, but those houses that get split into self-contained units that are really small and cause problems. So I think that it will be interesting to see, once the Renters' Rights Bill has bedded in, actually how much of that tackles those smaller HMOs, rather than us going through, Bristol had bought stuff in, it cost them over £100,000 for the evidence base. It's getting a lot harder to build the evidence for citywide stuff, because you have to prove you've got massive citywide failure. And then if you come to target it, it becomes really expensive to try and target it to get the evidence base to get past the inspectors. We've been looking at what was previously the Renters Reform Bill and now the Renters Rights Bill, and watching how much of that actually would encompass that sort of problem for us, but actually meaning that all landlords bear some of the cost, that we're able to track all landlords. But what we really like on renters' rights is the database will be a national database, and we can work with other local authorities. So we might say we've got two properties that have the same name, but now suddenly we can talk to Torbay and Exeter or Cornwall and say, well, what have you got this landlord in your area as well? and actually do some really smart stuff about picking up the landlords that are doing it wrong. So I think we're not knee-jerking into trying to deal with that problem, because both the previous government and the current government have been on a track of trying to come up with some solutions that meet a much bigger issue in the private rented sector, which is those poor quality landlords, some of them criminal, some of them rogue, as we get them described, who are working just outside the rules. And if we brought it to 3, they'd suddenly be loads of 2-bed flats available instead of 3 beds, because the landlords who wish to milk the system will always work their way round. I think the new Renters' Rights Bill is going to be really important on some of that. And although we're still waiting for it to be enacted, we're still waiting for some of the stuff, we're on the front foot on that. So I'll leave Matt to talk both about HMOs and where we're doing work on renters' rights.
I'm not sure there's more to add on HMOs at the moment, but I will just give you a very quick précis of the Renters' Rights Bill. So there are 4 main strands of the Renters' Rights Bill, and that's looking at the rights of tenants, security and stability, landlords' rights and market concern, and then housing quality. And the big strand is in housing quality. And as Councillor Penberthy said, bringing in all of those smaller units just means, at the same time as strengthening our enforcement powers, means we'll be able to do a lot more work. There is a caveat with that, and that's about capacity. So we're already talking to the government about new burdens funding, and then what that transfers into once we get through new burdens. So they've already said there will be new burdens, we just don't know what scale. So that will allow us to build the team to do the work. We're doing some gap analysis at the moment to just try and understand where some of those gaps are, those types of properties you're talking about, and then what we can do to intervene.
I've got a few questions. On Plan for Homes 4, why do we keep giving it a number afterwards? What's the rationale? Because doesn't it get confusing? Couldn't it just be Plan for Homes refreshed on this date? There doesn't seem to be any natural linkages. It doesn't seem to be every 2 years. It seems to be a bit ad hoc. When's Plan for Homes 5?
When we first launched Plan for Homes, we did it over a 5-year window, and we'd actually managed to do most of the work in the first 2 and a bit years. So we then launched a new Plan for Homes, and rather than saying it was the old Plan for Homes, because there's new budgets get attached to this, new capital programme gets attached to it, new work programmes, and it gets restructured, we didn't want to lose the brand of Plan for Homes. It's one that a lot of the people working in the housing sector in the city understand. So it was an evolution, but we wanted to badge it as such. So the first 3 we've managed to deliver faster than we had anticipated. Each one comes out initially as a 5-year work programme. If we get to year 3 and we finished it all, we're not going to sit on our laurels for 2 years. Actually, if we think in year 2 that we're getting close to completing, we'll already start, okay, what are the next big pushes? So we will continually, they're live, we're continually adding things. Plan for Homes 4, each one has become slightly bigger. Plan for Homes 1 was really very much about market recovery and building some new homes. It was housing delivery. We got empty homes added in. We then began to add in some of the other bits. So on each time, it's become more holistic and actually saying we don't deal with homelessness unless we deal with long-term temp. And we don't deal with long-term temp unless we deal with affordable. To get affordable, we need housing delivery across all sectors, because there's the Section 106 contribution to affordable. But in the meantime, we've got almost 50% of the population living in the private rented sector. How do we ensure quality in the private rented sector? And we need to cut people's bills, so we need retrofit. So rather than having lots of empty ones, actually with the Housing Development Partnership and the South West Landlords and others that we work with in partnership, they like the sense that we're achieving things and we're moving forwards, and we're all driving change. And the fact that each major iteration of this is here's what we've achieved on the last one, and here's the big new push, here's the new direction, here's what we're all signing up to, is giving people that sense of really doing well. In theory, Plan for Homes 4 shouldn't have been published for another 3 or 4 years, at least. The fact we're a year into it just goes to show that that partnership work is working.
Just some feedback there, Chris. From looking at it, it all seems a bit ad hoc on on it. Something to think about. I get your point, but I don't want it to turn into a FIFA. It'll be, by the time we know it, it'll be Plan for Homes 8, and it all gets a bit strange. I like the Plan for Homes title of things. It's just something to be aware of. Something I think is missing in this report is population growth. We talk about the housing crisis, and that, you know, there was 1 million extra people in the country in 2023, and it's growing in different ways. It seems crazy to me that we don't mention in the report at any point population growth and how that puts pressure on housing. Why is that?
There are lots of things that put pressure on housing. We don't talk about new housing formations. So children growing up and leaving home. We mention but don't analyse the impact of VORG. We don't mention at all the impact of household breakdowns, and therefore one household turning into two. There are lots of things that do this. The population statistics of the city show that although we have some growth, it's not massive, but we have substantial needs. The private rented sector will tell you that when they're renting, there's 50 or 100 applicants for most properties. We've got the figures in here on the affordable sector and demand compared to turnover, and we can see that there's not the housing stock that the owner-occupiers wish to buy because there's a market that's not met. So we know that. We could quite happily put in, this is the population of Plymouth. That doesn't change any of the underlying issues, let alone the fact that we're now trying to future-proof in terms of the jobs that we know that Babcock's, being an AI centre for marine AI nationally, and others are bringing. So we know that there is city growth to do with the growth agenda, where we need to accommodate a population that is the intended growth of the city to do that. So what we're doing here is talking about the housing needs to do that in the same way that in education, it's what's the education need. So we could put the figure in, but it wouldn't materially change things. John wanted to chip in there.
Just in terms of, if you turn to page 67, it does reference the Plan for Homes will, however, support the growth of Plymouth's population. So there's kind of some reference to it.
Okay, you found a tiny moment there in the report. I think if you're doing a plan for homes, you must talk about what the whole nation is talking about, and that's the population growing, which is causing a housing crisis. Also, something in there, how obviously a big issue at the moment is the small boats crisis. How is that not mentioned in our report as well? How are we dealing with that with the housing stock?
Asylum seekers are not part of the generic population of the country. There are no asylum seekers on the housing waiting list. The housing waiting list is growing because people in the city are needing housing. That's people who are UK citizens needing housing. The housing is not being taken by asylum seekers because it is not. We don't have enough housing to meet the needs of the people in the city. This is not a paper on asylum or migration. It's a paper that is about, as an action plan, how do we deliver the housing elements of the joint local plan, and how do we respond to the housing elements of the Plymouth plan? And those are the ones which you might want to challenge in terms of, are they telling the right story? What this does is it seeks to ensure that the big plans that the council has signed up to, the Plymouth plan and the joint local plan, we have the housing available to meet those needs. So we are a subset of that big plan and the direction, and then the quality comes out of the back of that. And similarly, the need to house people on the housing waiting list in affordable housing. So I actually don't believe that the fact that we have an asylum system in the country is the reason we have a need here. It's not what's showing up on that homelessness report as why people are presenting on homelessness. That's Section 21 evictions by landlords, and it's VORG as key drivers of that, and household breakup as key drivers. Those are things that are not to do with asylum. They're to do with our local population and how we support them in the housing that they need.
Thank you, Chris. But again, we have a plan for homes, and we have no mention of the asylum system. For instance, there is the government as a national contract with Serco to give landlords a 5-year contract to house asylum seekers. I see no mention of this in the plan for homes. Why is this?
The government has identified how much housing is needed in Plymouth. It is already provided. It is not making any pressures on new housing provision. Therefore, we're not planning for it in the same way. We're not planning for the housing that existing people are housed in. What we're looking at is the needs and the growth. The government has, for a very long time, had a fixed number of properties in the city. Actually, I don't think any are with Serco. That is there, but they're not. There are no requests from government to change any of that, so it's not having an impact on the city. So we don't have anything in our action plan about things that aren't having an impact on the city. What we have in our action plan are the things we know, which are that we have people who are homeless who need housing, we have people on a waiting list who need housing, we have victims of VORG who need housing, we have people coming to the city for employment who need housing, and this is an action plan about meeting those housing needs in physical stock and making sure that the housing that we have in the city is up to standard.
It seems that Councillor, there's missing elements to this, okay, and I'm raising them and you're deciding that they're not worth featuring. It's something that I'm feeding back to you. On page 18 of the report, we talk about homelessness. And you've previously said that homeless people go on holiday. How was that? Is that reflected in last year's numbers? And is that having an impact this year? Are people coming to Plymouth on holiday or leaving in rough sleeping?
Every year we see, not only here in Plymouth, but in other places which have a summer tourist season, some homeless people moving to those summer season peaks. So that is the way that rough sleeping works. It is a slight impact. It's why we see, one of the reasons we see rough sleeping numbers rising in the summer. Another is that people who are sofa surfing have more comfortable options sometimes in the summer than being in a crowded flat by sleeping outside. But there is, across the country, a shift in where people are. Now it's less in Plymouth than it is in some places, but it is definitely one we see in Plymouth. During winter months, those people are more likely to go to big urban centres, bigger than Plymouth, because actually there's more warmth in the centre of a bigger city than there is here in Plymouth. And so it is, whilst never pleasant to be rough sleeping, it is less unpleasant than trying to sleep on the hoe with a southwesterly coming in. So it's just the way it works. Describing it as going on holiday is actually about trying to live the best life you can if you don't have anywhere permanent to live. And it is on the rough sleeper numbers, which are very low, but yes, we will always see a slight peak in the summer months, and then it will drop off again a bit. But we are seeing that. What we are seeing, like the rest of the country, is because of the housing crisis, more and more people beginning to rough sleep. Actually, we're beginning to see more and more people sleeping in cars and caravans and vans and motorhomes. So actually, tradesmen living in the back of their trades van because that's the only way they can afford to live. That's also an interesting bit because those tradespeople will follow where work is because they're less homebound. So it's complicated, but yes, we do have a bit of a seasonal peak because of the fact we're a seaside town.
And just my final point, I will get through, but so like I said, I did have a few questions on this. On page 71, there's the sort of figures, gross net figures for house building in Plymouth, and it really, I don't understand how we're going to get anywhere close to our targets, because we just have to look at the numbers. It's 189 gross, and that's affordable houses. Isn't this just completely? And then we talk about the 10,000 homes that we want in the city centre. We're so far off track. It's just, I think we need to really be realistic with the public when we're saying 5,000 homes, let alone the extra 10,000, where we only had gross 189 last year. And how many actual, this is all affordable housing, yeah? Well, the house builders are doing this with social housing, affordable housing. How many actual houses were built last year in Plymouth? Just houses for people on the market. What is that figure?
Can I just clarify, because I've got different page numbers than you have at the top of my pages, because I didn't.
Page 71, 3 of 11, sorry.
73 if you've got the full document.
No, it would be useful to know which of the papers and the bottom. Oh, so page, sorry. It's just rather than having a different set of papers for two meetings this week, because I presented this at Cabinet, I've got the Cabinet papers which have different numbers on them. So, okay. So
The key question, Chris,
yeah,
you can defer to colleagues
no,
for
no,
succinct
I can.
answers.
Now I know which table
How
you're
many
referring.
actual houses were built last year? Not affordable ones, just commercial houses, because I think the number's quite frighteningly small.
Well, that table tells you in year 23-24, which is the last year we have figures for, because it takes a bit of time to work out, there were 282 additional homes built in the city. The net is because there will have been some homes demolished in the city at the same time, and of those 282, 189 were affordable. Now that is appalling, and I'm quite happy to call out why it is appalling. At Planning Committee, planners bring forward lots of schemes for the city. I will defer to Paul in a minute, but my guess, I think we are about within Plymouth boundaries, 4,500 homes with permission to build to the private sector where they haven't made a start on site, and thousands more where they've made a start and they've actually stopped or they've slowed down. That's the private market not delivering. What those figures show is while the private market isn't delivering, the affordable market and the bit we're supporting is. So the action is, how do we prompt the private sector to invest? And how do we get the private sector to build out the homes that they have got permissions for? Because all those people who sit on the planning committee and give all that time and effort are saying yes to homes for Plymouth people, and those homes aren't being built. So that's where we are. I'd like to see more. What we're doing in terms of the city centre is working with Homes England and potentially the New Towns Commission to say, how do we incentivise private sector investment in the city for new homes, and what that will mean, because that's the only way this will happen. It won't only be taxpayers' money, it'll be private sector. That's why Schroders have bought the Armada Centre, because Schroders are seeing that, they've gone public on the fact they bought that, because they see that it is an investment opportunity for them to build housing in the city centre. And that's because, as they explicitly said to Tracy Lee, the work that had been done to build forward public realm and public facilities in the city and the investment that the city council was making to lever it. So I'll tell you why we haven't got them at the moment. It's private sector market failure that we are seeking to try and incentivise through the money and the land that we release. Paul, I think you might want to pick up on more.
Yes, thank you. To answer your question directly, Chair, the answer to how many homes were built is the gross figure of 282, and obviously the net figure allows for demolitions as at last year. In terms of the, just to remind you, the local plan, joint local plan requirement for the Plymouth area only is 660 dwellings per annum. So your point about, is it challenging? Undoubtedly it's challenging. There will be a variety of global and market factors that come into play, and there's always an issue about viability of sites in terms of actually delivering projects. But to give you some reassurance, although without wishing to detract from the fact that it is challenging, remember that the plan period started in 2014. There are 6,798 dwellings that have actually been delivered in 2014 to 2024. So that's actually 198 dwellings above what should have been the cumulative target by 2024. So we're just, as at last year, just ahead of where we should have been and what we planned for. And as Councillor Penberthy alluded, there are, as at last year, there were 5,110 dwellings with consent yet to be started. So clearly one of the things that we do, because on every single one of the 117 housing sites in the joint local plan, there is a lead planning officer, a lead housing officer and a lead transport officer, and we work with the landowners and agents to try to unblock the issues that are getting in the way of delivery. A lot of those issues will be down to market confidence and around viability, but that's the basic answer to the question. We're just ahead of our cumulative target, but as you've rightly noted, the figure for last year is low. And I would expect, given the current global uncertainty, I would expect the figure in the coming years to be low as well.
Yeah, thank you. But all I'm saying is we can go into Paul, you're very good at the projections and all the rest of it. What the reality is the reality here today. The amount of actual houses that aren't affordable is pitiful. It's almost under 50, okay? And even if it was, we wanted to take in the total amount, trying to get to 5,000 homes in 5 years is never going to happen. Like, let's be real, and we've got to present reports that are realistic. There might be plots of land all over the country, in Plymouth included, that have planning permissions. But when you look at the trend for the last 3 years, we had more success in Brexit, the COVID period in 2021. It's just something I think you need to reflect upon.
Point of order, Chair. Yeah, I understand there's chair's discretion, and I just wanted to clarify something earlier about when you talked about free speech. I think you've talked quite a while on some of these points, and you've had the ability to be able to engage on a back and forth. I just wanted to kind of ask that same courtesy will be given to this side, because it's been ensured that some people got supplementaries and some didn't. And so I was just understanding, when you termed I'm all for free speech, are we going to get the same courtesy to have back and forths like yourself?
Thank you, Councillor Sproughton. I know what you're saying. That was my last question. I said I had a few questions to ask. There might be items where only one particular councillor wants to fire 10 questions and everybody else is quite content to sit back, okay? I want to let this meeting flow as much as possible. Yes, it's the first agenda item and I'm very passionate about it, and I've had a flow of questions that have lasted about 15 minutes, okay? In the scheme of what we're doing, that isn't a long time. That is the end of my questioning at this particular moment, and I'll get through the other questions as quickly as possible. But I don't want to curtail anyone's free speech, and I haven't denied anybody a supplementary question so far.
Supplementary on that. I haven't accused you of trying to deny free speech. And I understand that you've given multiple questions, which is absolutely routine. It's just some of those questions, there was back and forths, which went a few times, and I just wanted to have that same courtesy.
Back and forth is exactly what we want. We want the flow of debate, and we absolutely want it, because that's one thing I couldn't bear when I've been on panels over the years. We need a flow. We need a conversation. It doesn't need to be rigid. Sometimes, at any moment, you could have the same flurry that I've just had, and I'll let it flow, because it's engaging, it's for the public and for ourselves to challenge what's happening. That is the end of my particular segment of questions.
In which case, Chair, can I answer that last question?
No.
You said, you asked whether this was realistic. I'd like to go back to 2012, 2011, 2012, 2013, when we were told it was unrealistic to expect there to be 5,000 homes over 5 years in the city because it hadn't been achieved for more than a decade. And we set out to do it, and we did it. And we have continued to deliver well through until COVID Brexit year. And we are now seeking to set the frameworks to do that. This is a 5-year plan with 5,000 homes over 5 years, and we are working our guts off, which is why we are talking about large builds in the city centre. They're not all going to be here tomorrow, but we are going to bust the gut to hit that 5,000 homes within 5 years, because that's the ambition the city needs.
Councillor Penberthy, thank you for your interjection. You do speak a lot, okay? You speak a lot, and so you get a big amount of airtime in these meetings. I would like just be conscious that I want the councillors to be heard, okay? I'll move on to my next person to ask a question. That's Councillor Alison Rainsford.
Thank you, Chair. It's a very short question, really. It's to do with an item on page 38, 6.4, specifically the railway station development, which is stalled at the moment. Funding is required. Could somebody explain whether that is either DFT, Department for Transport, or is it Network Rail that we're waiting for in terms of unblocking that hold-up?
I think it's mainly to do with issues associated with Network Rail, but colleagues in economic development will know that. So you may be able to weave a question into Mr. Draffin when he turns up later.
Thank you. I'll bear that in mind. It's it's important because that at the top of the is where people come to the city. That's an important site. Can I take a second question on a slightly different subject? Again, it's very brief. Homelessness prevention grant. We've been given a significant uplift there, and clearly the preventative measures which the council have adopted have been successful in helping to reduce numbers in the past. Can you talk me through how that additional money is likely to be spent? Are we going to be using the same programme, same partners, or are we looking to use it in any different areas?
I'll kick off and then Matt can pick up on detail, gives him a chance to do stuff. What we are aware of is that we've spent years building the Complex Needs Alliance. We're not about to ditch the Complex Needs Alliance and the work programmes, because most of those work programmes have identified things that could be done. One of the things I've been talking with both Path and Bournemouth Churches about for a while was we needed more money for prevention. That's not only to stop people becoming homeless in the first place, but if someone does become homeless, how we stop them getting caught in a cycle of homelessness. So what would that mean about support for people in bed and breakfasts, and what's it mean about support for families? And so what we are effectively spending all of that money on is prevention in one way or another, looking at how we build on the programmes that we already have, the skills and expertise we already have. So that was our approach in the start when I was working with Ruth on it, and we spent quite a lot of time talking about that in the other committee where we report on it. But Matt, have you got anything else to add on the specifics of that programme?
Yeah, I can do. So the government has mandated that we must spend 51% of the homelessness prevention grant on prevention. So that was a mandate that came down from government with the new funding. And there are a range of programmes that we're delivering through that money. There's some work around understanding our data, trying to get upstream and get to households before they reach crisis. That's about understanding. There's a lot of data in the city, and we need to understand that better and try and get to people before they hit crisis. So that's one thing we're doing. There's additional support going into families in bed and breakfast to try and help them move out. There's additional support going into other forms of temp again to help people move on. That will then create some flow. But the big thing is trying to get downstream and get before crisis. So there's some work around the website, information for people so they understand the process and all of those things. And when you combine them, what you hope is you'll reduce numbers at your front door.
So we have Councillor Holloway next, Councillor Stevens, and then we'll try and get in Lauren again. I'm conscious of time. And Jamie, okay, if we can just give you a context of where we are. So fire away, Councillor Holloway.
Thank you. Working people in Plymouth who rent often spend about between about a quarter to a third of their disposable income on their accommodation, on their housing. We've had a lot of discussion today about the different components, new housing stock coming live, the ambitions that a Labour Council will deliver in the time period ahead. But we're also later in the agenda having some big discussions about the new types of jobs being created, people who might come into the city, want to live in the city centre. I represent an area which has a high number of working people who rent rather than own their properties. What modelling have you done about the longer term projections on whether rents are likely to go up or down as a result of these trends around increased housing provision, but also new types of workers and focus on the city centre? Thank you.
It's modelling that we are in the process of doing as part of the work on the city centre anyway, because a private rented sector model is likely to be the early investment, private sector investment in the city centre. So understanding that's important. I think you're lucky if you're finding people in the private rented sector only spending 25 to 30% of their incomes on housing. We're regularly finding people spending 50 to 60, 70% of their income just on their rent. And it's one of the reasons we're seeing a change in the people approaching us on homelessness. We are one of the least affordable private rented sectors in the country, which is why we need more housing stock because of the number of people. So part of the city centre opening is for those people who don't have large families and want family housing. We know there's a demand for the private rented sector in flats, especially meets the incoming needs of the dockyard and others. So we're modelling it, we're continually looking at it, and it's happening both in terms of new build, but also that work that Matt was talking about getting up line and seeing where we're at. So it is happening. What we know from talking to agents and landlords is that it's not difficult to get a tenant, and it's not difficult to get a tenant at almost any price you want, and that's one of the reasons that we've got this pressure in the market, is that it's not just people trying to buy, it's actually the tenant market in the city is overheated too, which is why it's just why I keep on saying it's more housing at every price point and in every tenure, and we hope that the city centre will help deliver that and take some pressure off some of the other family housing that then could cease to be under-occupied or be sought to convert it into HMOs so that those family houses can be used for families in the city, rebalancing some of the wards like yours with people who want to live in a city terraced housing, which is the sort of housing I grew up in.
Quick supplementary for me. Would it be possible to come back to committee with further details on whether, when you've done this modelling, looking at the projections, whether working people in Plymouth can expect their rents to go up or down as a result of this plan being delivered? Thank you.
Well, yeah, it will probably be a year's time as we come to the next, because those are long distance type things. We will. I would like to see enough extra housing come into the city to see prices drop a bit. However, while the market is heated at the moment, if we pop more in, it's going to need to be very substantial to make a big switch. If we could slow the growth down or minimise the growth at all, that would be welcome news, I think, to lots of people. But it's why that next items you've got on growth in the city is really important, because that's about people being able to earn enough to live well in the city.
Thank you. Councillor Stevens, you can always direct your questions to any panel member you wish.
I'm grateful for that. On the face of it, I think one thing that could be done if we're serious about boosting numbers is not opposing every planning application for dwellings in our ward when they come forward, particularly when they're taking no longer viable commercial properties back into housing. I think not doing that would be a good way of showing our commitment as individuals to housing numbers in the city. But I wanted to come back to the problem of planning applications not being built out, and there was recently an announcement from the government about giving councils the opportunity to take those pieces of land into our ownership so that we can then direct others to be a lot more proactive. So do we know where the government are on bringing those sort of proposals forward?
No, I do welcome the build it or lose it type things, because it's just land banking and profiteering. There are viability issues. It costs more to build a house here than it does in Bristol because things have to travel further. But land values are less and incomes are less, and so housing values are less. We also have less competition because, when we were visiting some places in the north recently, they were talking about the volume of SME builders in their area, and it's because there were so many housing markets in the area. We have very few. That also drives prices up. So there's a whole load we need to do there. I would welcome anything personally. Paul, you might have some more sense from, especially from RTPI, on where the government's up to with moving that forward.
The government and the previous government have been very concerned about the fact that lots of planning permissions have been given, but not all of them are built out. There will be reasons for that, because clearly most of the consents granted to private developers who are obviously answering to shareholders. And so there's something called the absorption rate, which is the housing. You're not going to put into the market more of a product, in this case a house, that is going to result in the price of that product going down. That would be odd economics for a private company to take. So there's been a long-standing concern about the fact that planning permissions granted, one would like to think in accordance with an up-to-date local plan, and therefore with some democratic oversight to where housing should happen and where it shouldn't happen, that those permissions are then converted into actual homes on the ground. I think a previous planning minister once famously said, you can't live in a planning permission. And so the government we've taken some action on that locally through the previous market recovery initiatives that we've taken. And as Councillor Penberthy referred, we're looking at options to unlock sites locally, but the government have basically brought forward some proposals around build-out rates and powers, using CPO powers to effectively take land away from developers. That consultation ended this week, and so the government will be deliberating on the responses they get, and clearly there may well be further guidance change, the National Planning Policy Framework, or legislative change with the Planning and Infrastructure Bill going through Parliament as we speak.
Two more to finish. Councillor McClay.
Thank you, Chair. I want to touch on temporary and emergency accommodation. I think we all accept that we're one bad circumstance away from being in that position ourselves. So it's really important that when we're talking about it from that place of being a potential service user one day, and knowing that you would want to come to a place that is warm, safe, and welcoming. And I was wondering if you could share with the panel examples of our emergency and temporary accommodations so that we know what people are walking to in the front door.
That is enormously complex, because it'll depend on the person and where we've been going. While Matt gets his thoughts, there is a difference between someone who's been a habitual street sleeper with very complex needs and where will be appropriate for them, compared to a family who've held their tenancy for years and years and years and needing temporary accommodation. The first step is likely to be a bed and breakfast for both. That's really not good for families, and it's why we've made that big concentrated effort on bed and breakfasts and families in the first year, and why we are looking at family temp accommodation. The next steps will be predominantly through service providers like Path and Bournemouth Churches, which will depend on the user group again. So for single people, it's likely to be a shared house, because that's what's most economic, and you don't want to put people in temporary accommodation that means that they don't ever want to move. So they need to aspire to something that's better, and a shared house is that next step. We are currently just about at the final stages of the Royal business cases on how we come up with a financially viable model on the Royal for remodelling that. And that's really exciting. And Raglan will also, redevelopment of Raglan is also on the card. So we improve temp for families, both in terms of spec and quantity, But then the conversations we're having with people like Path and Bournemouth churches are, what do we do now for more independent? And actually there are some potential ones coming online that are definitely higher quality than a lot of people would have been used to in the past, because we're all seeking to improve the quality of the housing that we offer all the time. It's not what has traditionally been shown as almost dormitory style accommodation or anything else. It is trying to give people, once we're into temp rather than bed and breakfast, the fact that people can cook food. They've got space to relax as a family unit, for children to do homework and other things, because that's all part of the mix. But temp is never where you would want to live, or you would want friends and family to live. And it's why ultimately we need more long-term housing in the city and affordable. Matt, you might want to touch base on some of the more detail.
Well, not really the detail. The assurance I can give you is that the current plans that we're working to are to move us away from nightly paid accommodation. That's not good for anybody. So that's hotel and bed and breakfast accommodation. Councillor Penberthy's talked about families in particular, but it's not really good for anybody. So the plans that we have are about moving away from nightly paid into longer paid accommodation. So that'll be things like private rented accommodation that we've taken from a landlord and leased, and we're using it to provide temporary accommodation. It might be accommodation that the RP has bought, and then that we're then using. We're working with PCH at the moment around some of the changes they're making in regeneration, and using some of their properties on a temporary basis that are being regenerated. So there's lots of different bits, but the assurance is that we're trying to move from nightly paid into better forms of temporary accommodation for everybody.
Sorry, Chair, supplementary. I think I totally hear what you're saying about the difficulties around it, but I think in order to increase transparency so that we as a panel know and are able to provide that adequate scrutiny, we, I think, should be able to see what situations we're asking residents to go into.
In terms of homelessness and temp, that's why we go twice a year to the Housing and Communities panel, because they have a responsibility to scrutinise that. So we do go into that. What we're not able to talk about is, here's the individual of 400 or so different families and households in temp accommodation, because that is the overarching. But we do talk about the sorts of properties we're dealing with, the sorts of direction of travel we're going in, and we're moving away from, as has been said, that nightly small bed and breakfast accommodation with everything shared and nothing very secure, into units. But it will be a whole variety, and some of those will be purpose-built and some of those will be temporarily used. What we can give is assurance, because all of that has to still meet the same housing standards that other housing has to meet. So we are going in on quality housing, and housing that meets our own housing enforcement standards. So we can't go into every single case, but we do homelessness and temp every 6 months at the Housing and Communities panel, where they also grill us on this. So just to give you assurance that that bit of Plan for Homes is scrutinised elsewhere, but I don't think that we're in a position to say, here is this house in this street and this is the quality of that house in that street, because actually that's very, very granular and it's changing all the time. What we are doing is looking at continually improving the services that we offer.
Councillor Bannerman.
Thank you, Chair. I know that BCHA are setting up 11 supported homes for people with mobility needs, and that we're on track for delivering major adaptations in homes for people who live with disabilities. Can you tell me about what considerations we've had to planning for disability needs when we're building new homes?
Yeah, I'll start and others will pick up. We're currently in the process of reviewing our supported and specialist housing needs assessment, because that gives us some indication. The waiting lists give us an indication of what housing need we have. And when we talk with registered providers, especially registered providers on our sites, we are then saying, actually, we'd like to see some of this. It's about viability quite often. But I was at North Prospect Library site a few weeks ago, where 4 of the flats of the 8 were accessible. The St Budo Library site, I think once again it was 4 of the ones on the St Budo Library site. That's disproportionate to the housing waiting list, but actually is ensuring that people with needs are met. I think from memory it's about 80 accessible properties that are pretty high priority at the moment on the waiting list.
It'll be something
Yeah.
around that magnitude.
So yeah, that would be quite a lot of new build to come on all at once. So we are looking at that. Paul can give you some, or Neil maybe will give you some on how we work with the housing providers on taking Matt's numbers into buildings.
Yeah, just to say the main way that we would address accessible housing need will be through the planning system. So on schemes over 50, 2 of those units need to be wheelchair accessible homes, what's called M43, so it's the highest level. And 20% on all schemes over 5 units need to be what's called M42, which is an accessible property at a lower standard. And those are part of the building regulations. And they were introduced at with the last joint local plan back in 2019, and that's something that's under review now. There could be a case for increasing that percentage and change the way we do that. But that delivers quite a lot of accessible homes across the city. But on top of that, as Councillor Penberthy says, when we release sites through Plan for Homes, council-owned sites, then we're often having conversations with housing providers about delivering higher levels than that. And that's why we will be delivering over and above the planning policy, and sometimes taking a reduction in the land value that we might otherwise get in order to achieve that better value housing output. So that has enabled us to deliver, I think it's 26, I can't remember the exact figure off the top of my head, but 26 fully accessible wheelchair units through Plan for Homes. That wouldn't have been otherwise delivered, certainly not through the private sector.
So is that a percentage? So what percentage are we thinking about for disabled homes then?
Overall, it's 20% on schemes over 5 units as an accessible home, but a fully wheelchair adapted home is 2% on schemes over 50 units. The costs are quite considerable of delivering those homes, and they're much larger units, but actually that's why through Plan for Homes we often take a view in terms of increasing that number and reducing the amount of receipt that we otherwise would get to deliver that higher level, higher proportion.
It would also be worth saying in some schemes we increase the subsidy we give as well, because quite often we subsidise affordable housing in the city, so we provide the viability gap between the Homes England and borrowing of an RP and the cost of delivery. So in St Peter's Close out in Plymouth, we didn't only do a cheaper land value, we also increased the subsidy that we gave to each home, which is for us a give money away thing in order to make that housing more available. So it's lots of bits in the mix, but it is high on our priority list in terms of new build.
And a sideline supplementary, please. I'm sure consideration has been given to individuals with neurodiversity, but I couldn't see it clearly noted anywhere in the report. I feel that this population can find experiencing homelessness, temporary accommodation, moving increasingly challenging. Their needs are often hidden. What consideration is given to future planning for these individuals?
It's one of the bits in the support and specialist housing needs assessment. We now have a specific chapter on neurodiversity that is being developed. So that includes, so we've got disability in older people and younger people and homelessness and domestic violence. We've got neurodiversity as one of the chapters in there. So we're currently looking at what that means in terms of future housing provision, what it looks like, and talking to providers as well as commissioners in order to ensure that we get that right.
So Matt, I know when you do temporary accommodation and stuff like that, is that neurodiverse need taken into consideration when we're looking at where we place them out of that stock that you have?
Yeah, and so yes, it is, and we're also making sure the team are trained around working with people that have neurodiversity, because it's quite clear that across services there's a varying level of understanding of neurodiversity. So when you put the two together, what we have to remember is this whole conversation has been about a housing crisis, has been about us using a lot of emergency accommodation and trying to change that mix. So we don't always have the option of doing the best for people. It's about, it's an emergency, you need something, this is what you can have. But when we step out of that, then yes, the team are working to find the right type of accommodation for the right person.
Okay, brilliant. That went on very much longer than expected, but actually the people of Plymouth would want us to talk about the housing crisis. There isn't many issues bigger. I would argue it's the biggest issue there is at the moment. So thank you for everyone's questions. Thank you to the panel. And we will note the report. We will follow those recommendations, which seem perfectly logical, to maximise the impact of the South West Housing and Construction Conference, to promote, develop opportunities, overcome challenges, to delivery and secure inward investment, which we all want for Plymouth. Everyone happy with that?
Chair, can I ask? The panel also said they might come back in a year's time with the modelling on future rents, if we could include that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll happily do that in whichever way works best in terms of the detail of that. But yes, happy to come back once we've done the work.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to economic insight and intelligence. Thank you. Okay, welcome everyone on this agenda item. We've had a very meaty and fruitful discussion on housing. What we're going to do is, because of time, is agenda item 6, economic insight and intelligence, tees up the next agenda item, number 7. So if you just give us a report on 6, and then hold your questions, and then let them fly in when we get into the productive growth element, which is the economic strategy pillar 1. So if we could just give that quick presentation on that item, that would be great.
There we go. Thanks, Chair. That's great. I mean, just a short introduction. If I could perhaps start off by introducing the team, if that's okay. So we'll start, if possible, with Julie. If you could just do name and rank, I'd be grateful.
Julia, Electrical Partnerships Manager. Oh, sorry, I got it wrong. Sorry. Hi, I'm Lauren Peterman, Economic Development Officer.
Afternoon, everyone. I'm Richard Davis, and I'm the Vice Chancellor and CEO at the University of Plymouth.
Just, I know, because we're used to it, but I'll get your guess. Just when you speak.
I'm going to start again.
Yeah.
Richard Davis, Vice Chancellor and CEO at the University of Plymouth.
Councillor Tudor Evans, Leader of the Council.
So David Draffin, the Director of Economic Development for the City Council.
And finally, Nina Salaka, Inward Investment and Enterprise Manager.
So, just a few couple of words, Chair, if that's okay. So we agreed, we put our economic strategy to bed last year, and you were pivotal in that. So we agreed 5 themes, and those themes are going to be the single work programme for the department this year. So our intention is to bring every one of those themes back to the 5 meetings of this year, so you get the chance to literally ensure that what we said we'd do last year, we're going to do. One of the things, and the first theme today is productive growth and high value jobs. Is the first thing we're going to do today. And this first session, which is the economic update, was something the scrutiny panel asked for about 18-20 months ago, to basically give a every 6 month quick flash on the economic stats, so that you were kind of aware of what's going in the economy. So Lauren, who does a lot of our economic intelligence, is going to give you 3 slides on the stats that really tee up the conversation we're then going to have around high value jobs and employment. So the way we'll run it is that Lauren will do these 3 slides, and you'll, as Steve said, you'll be desperate to ask questions, but hold them, because they're all going to be rolling into the next session. Then Tudor will introduce the session. Richard's going to give some words. He's the lead for this pillar, working at the Growth Board, so he's very, very grateful for Richard to join us today, given the scale of job he has. And then Nina who leads this particular take for the action plan. After that, we've then got a session that links straight on into the free port. So the 3 fit really well together. So we're really looking forward to this session. So Lauren is going to do some quite quick, and then we'll roll straight into the next session. So thanks very much, Chair. That's great.
Hello. So like David said, I'm just going to give a very, very brief overview just to really provide some context for the following presentation. So this slide, the first slide, is just really a summary of the report that we submitted before this presentation. As I said, I'm just going to give a very high-level summary of the key stats. So one of the first ones, or the overall kind of narrative of this work, was that there's a high job vacancy posting in the city and moderate wage increases, which, although these remain under regional and national wages, these 2 things mean that the labour market is particularly tight in Plymouth, and this has other implications when we look at the workforce and developing the workforce. I just wanted to draw attention to the modern industrial or the UK modern industrial strategy that was published a few weeks ago, that mentioned Plymouth specifically as a case study, and highlighted the defence sector within the city and the potential for investment there. Also, just to provide another context, the Plymouth has just been designated the UK's National Centre for Marine Autonomy, which showcases the significance of that sector within the city again. And below, just for your reference, I've put in the GVA, which is the size of a particular sector within the economy, the FTE, which is full-time employment, so that's job numbers, and then productivity, which is GVA per FTE, which these things will be explained later in this presentation. And I believe Nina is going to circle back to marine and defence specifically. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So this is the workforce analysis. So economic activity is at 77.5% within Plymouth, with a claimant count stabilised at roughly 3.5%. So this shows that the city's in relatively full employment, and again highlights the tight labour market within the city. The number of job postings in the city has increased over the past 10 years to be roughly 4,500 in May 2025. And all of that considered, the graph on the left is a graph that was presented, I believe, at GAP, and it shows the potential growth of the workforce in the city and the persistent gap that will result if there's no intervention in creating jobs. So the blue line is the number of jobs needed in the city over the next 10 years, and the black line at the bottom is the workforce projections. And this work shows that this gap will increase if no intervention in the job market happens. Again, just to kind of give you an oversight of the economy as a whole, the bottom graph shows the weekly gross pay for workers in the city. As I said before, the median weekly pay is below national and regional averages, however, has increased by 35% in the last 10 years to roughly £570 per week. When we break that down into the highest and the lowest workers, so that is the highest workers being the top 20% of earners and the lowest being the bottom 20%, the highest earners have increased by just 1.8%, whereas the lowest workers have increased by 28.1%, showing that the lowest workers have increased significantly more than the highest, and the gap between pay is closed. Thank you. And then the last slide feeds nicely onto the next presentation, and I've just thought I would highlight some of the productivity and GVA within the city. So the productivity within the city, is relative productivity is 81.1% of the UK average. It's worth noting that that includes London, so Plymouth is unlikely ever to reach 100% just because of the nature of that. And I've broken this down to GVA per hour, and this is nominal. So the reason I broke this down was, although Plymouth productivity is growing, as seen by the nominal GVA per hour figures, the rate of growth is less than the national growth, so the relative or comparative productivity hasn't grown. One reason for this is likely due to the labour constraints I spoke about earlier. So lack of skills means that relative productivity growth has slowed. And again, bringing it back to the industrial strategy, I've highlighted in the table below some of the key sectors that were spoken about in the UK industrial strategy and where they overlap with Plymouth. So the figures on there are the Plymouth figures for these significant or highly productive sectors, and the next presentation will go into them in a little bit more detail. But I've highlighted them because by increasing employment numbers in these highly productive figures, the potential to boost overall productivity within the city and lower the gap with relative growth will be reduced, and that's one way to address this issue of relative versus normative productivity. Then that's the end of my slide, so that's just a very short, brief summary for you to provide some context for the next presentation.
Thank you, Laura. That last slide, am I going crazy? That wasn't in our report. That last slide.
The last slide?
The first two were.
I think at the, I'll double check.
We'll circulate it, Steve.
Yeah, I can.
Thank you. Yeah, I lost the thread on it.
No.
For you, Charles, I can ping the presentation round to members now.
So thank you so much, Lauren. So we're about to dive into what that means in great detail. But if I just probably give my take, so the city for a long time has lagged behind national average wages and productivity. Productivity is a method of measuring economic output, basically. You can never achieve 100% because London has a huge impact. So London is so distorting, so you never get to 100% of the national average. So we've been spending the last decade working really hard on a variety of activities to raise wages and to raise productivity, and these have been discussed here multiple times. But we've also got full employment effectively, which means that the labour market is really tight. So by full employment, we mean those that are available to work are either engaged or they're economically inactive. And there's two reasons. But the key graph you were shown there was the blue line and the other line, and Tudor and Richard will talk about this next. We have a gap in 2035 where the economy effectively will need 25,000 more jobs than the workforce, which is an extraordinarily brilliant position to be in, and the first time we've been in that situation for decades, but needs a lot of proactivity to ensure we maximise that opportunity. And that is really the frame, if you can hold that and all the questions to perhaps jump in the next agenda item, but to give you the stats so you're empowered with those questions was really what we wanted to do. So, but thank you, Lauren, for doing that.
Okay, brilliant. So if we, as we have discussed, if we move into the meat of things, Councillor Evans, it'd be great if you could start us off, and feel free to acknowledge us for questions.
Thanks very much. I mean, it's great that we're focusing the meetings around the 5 pillars of the economic strategy. Productive growth and high-value jobs, which I'm going to look at today, inclusive growth, sustainable growth, civic pride and regeneration and skills all have a part to play in solving some of the problems that they're nice problems to have. So I am reveling in the fact that I am the champion for the high growth pillar, along with Richard and Nina as a lead officer. It does matter, as David hinted, productivity and wages really matter. Wages for their own sake, but it does underpin prosperity. I'd be interested in seeing how we're comparing on our productivity thing with other parts of the country. And people, you know, there's an issue for coastal communities, for example, so it'd be interesting to see how that plays out. Types of industry as well. So it'd be good to get some granularity to that perhaps at some point. But, you know, the reason why we want high wages is because of the benefit that that gives to citizens, of course, but it's actually about what that gives those citizens in terms of the choices they have in their daily lives. Now, the point about where we are at the moment, Chair, is that we have been pushing the legendary ball up the hill for quite some time. And we are at a moment where we're nearly at the top. And the significance of that is that we probably have a once in a lifetime, I don't say once in a generation, I think once in a lifetime opportunity to do something about those issues around productivity and pay, with everything that's happening at the moment. So we've got unprecedented investment in defence sector at the moment, and in the health sector too, don't forget. So you know, £4.4 billion investment in the dockyard, which will give us 5,500 new jobs, 2,000 construction jobs, a 50-year pipeline of work. There isn't a city outside of London that can boast that level of certainty over the next 5 or 6 decades. There isn't one. And so there's a real opportunity for us to capitalise on that. Quietly unnoticed, I think, in the media is the £3 billion investment that's going to be happening in Derryford, in the hospital. So rather than imaginary hospitals with imaginary money, we're having real investment with real money in Derryford. And of course, the city centre itself has got £1 billion pipeline of projects, which, you know, that's something to be trumpeting. We've created a new partnership to maximise the opportunity, because we don't want to do this and can't do this on our own. So Plymouth City Council, Royal Navy and Babcock have formed a Growth Alliance Plymouth, focused principally on innovation, supporting businesses to create those high value jobs, skills to make sure that the businesses have the skilled labour that they need. And it also makes sure that residents in Plymouth can grab those opportunities. Yes, we welcome new workers to come to Plymouth and start family and share lives, but also it's important that people who are already here sees the opportunities that are being created. And of course, housing is at the core of all of this. New workers will need somewhere to live. So what's been really amazing is to hear the government reflecting back our priorities at us. It's just so brilliant to hear. So we have the government's ear. We are playing in the defence card in every conversation we're having whatever it is. We're mentioning defence in Plymouth and security as being vital. But look what's happened just, in the last month. Hundreds of millions of pounds have been announced for Plymouth. So as Lauren said, the National Centre for Marine Autonomy, which is launched on the 13th of June, Maria Eagle gave us the nod. Now, what that means is we're a globally recognised cluster of marine excellence. That's what it means. It's not just a badge. It's an endorsement of where we've been trying to go for the last 10 years and the companies that we've attracted already. But the opportunity to turbocharge that is so exciting. I signed with the chair of Homes England a memorandum of understanding on the 18th of June. And Eamon Boylan and I are formally creating a new partnership to build 10,000 homes, principally focused on the city centre, and supporting our regeneration ambition. And what we are going to try and create here is an exemplar for urban living. We're a bit behind other parts of the country where similar sized cities of ours have already done this. We've been out of the habit of city living in Plymouth since the Second World War, when we moved everybody out of the town and moved them around to suburbs. But now the time is right to bring people into the city centre with all the benefits that will bring to retailers and other users of the city centre. On the 23rd of June, we were just one of a handful of cities that was set out in the industrial strategy and name checked as a national opportunity. They talked about the University of Plymouth Cybership Lab, Smart Sound, the UK's premier proven area for business to develop advanced marine technologies. With don't forget this, we'd be one of our little quiet things that we don't mention often enough, 1,000 square kilometres of highly monitored and deconflicted water. We've got Turnchapel Wharf, of course, where there's a range of businesses continue to pioneer in that marine autonomy space. And of course, we've got the Freeport. We'll talk about that in a bit. Babcock's Plymouth Blueprint on the 30th of June. For those of you who might have missed it, Babcock announced a defence dividend for Plymouth, which included, firstly, to locate 2,000 workers in the city centre as part of a global capability centre. Site to be identified. It'll bring workers in from the dockyard for sure to release land in the dockyard for other use, but what it will also do is bring new workers from all over the country into Plymouth. There's going to be a new integrated logistics hub and advanced manufacturing facility in the Freeport. That was done because of the fleet of footness of our officers who working with the South Arms, I think, saved that project from being an Amazon warehouse, if I could put it like that. And it's going to have decent jobs in it. And then a new centre for engineering and nuclear skills as well, which we should all be excited about. And I know our Defence Minister Luke Pollard's been advocating for that no end. So I'm really pleased for him that that's been announced. So capitalise on this opportunity. This is what this pillar is all about, really, if you think about it. We've got a £10 billion investment pipeline, we've got a world-class cluster of businesses, we've got 3 universities, other universities are available, a highly skilled workforce, we've got a Freeport, we've got a science park, and we've got an amazing business community. So this is our moment, Chair. This is our moment to capitalise on this opportunity. And I can tell you, we will work very hard for it. We deserve it, and we're going to make the most of it. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Richard, who will perhaps be a bit calmer than me, to talk about the role of the university, and then to Nina to talk about the actual projects.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much, Tudor. So it's a real pleasure to be here and to work with Tudor and the rest of the team, Nina and others on this. I just wanted to, I mean, for anyone who sometimes wonders what goes on in universities, I thought I would just try and give a very quick picture and why it's so relevant that the University of Plymouth takes a prominent role in this pillar of developing high-value jobs through innovation. So firstly, universities are full of people who are interested in economic growth and prosperity, developing new businesses, cutting-edge technologies, training people to fill those roles. We've got 3 universities in the city: Arts University Plymouth, Marjon University of Plymouth. University of Plymouth is substantially the biggest of the 3. We act as a mini Foreign Office for the city. I can tell you firsthand that I've had meetings with the Finnish Embassy, the Government of Western Australia, the Indian High Commissioner, the Indonesian Cultural Attaché. Why are we in that room? Because they are interested in what's going on in the marine sector and in defence, and they want to talk to us. So we have a mini Foreign Office that basically builds international connectivity. We have students from 130 countries around the world. We're training students, we're creating aspirational opportunities for students, and I'm really proud of the fact that the University of Plymouth aims to create opportunities for students who never thought they'd get to university. That's something we're very keen on. We have partners around Devon and Cornwall who help bring students in to our university. So the 3 universities are a huge asset for the city, and I'm very keen to move this agenda along. It's a moment in time, and I'm being told that as a new Vice-Chancellor, this feeling of activity and of our moment has come is something people keep telling me, so we should grab it. If you move the slides on, just one. There's a lot of information here, but I will chair an innovation task force, which Nina will talk about in a few moments' time. I just want to mention the sorts of things that are going on all the time in your university. So in the University of Plymouth, as was mentioned in the Modern Industrial Strategy, we have all sorts of pioneering facilities. Cybership is one of them. It's mentioned in the report. We're one of the few universities that got a mention in the Modern Industrial Strategy. Cybership is about preventing ships from being broken into, which if you manage to break into one and get it to rotate in the middle of the Panama Canal, you can seriously disrupt international trade. So being able to avoid that is important. We have another project called Amtech, which is very much a vision for technologies for automation for the private sector who want to put offshore wind turbines into the Celtic Sea, and for the defence sector. So it's inside the wire and outside the wire. So Amtech is all about the gadgets we will need to stay at the forefront of safety and resilience in the United Kingdom, on top of the water and underneath it. We've got fantastic stuff going on in the medical area. The one that's really impressed me is about brain imaging, new technologies for brain imaging taking place up at Derriford, working closely with the NHS on that. Inside the university, we've got all sorts of facilities to help students and staff develop businesses. We have something called the Cube, which is in our new Fitzroy building. We also have knowledge partnerships, etc., which is where we get funding to place people into businesses to develop these new technologies. And we're very, very interested in where is the puck going in terms of what 17-year-olds need in terms of skills, but not just 17-year-olds, but 32-year-olds who want to update and reskill and get to that next level in their career. So the world of universities is changing. We see students as different perhaps from 30 years ago. Not all are 18 to 25, and we need to adjust to that, and we will do. So very keen to be leading on this. Nina's going to tell you a little bit about the number of projects we've got and how we're working across those projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Hannah, would you move me on, please? If we're not stuck. There we go. There we go. So you've heard the context. We don't need more jobs. We need higher paid, better quality jobs, which is the whole point of this pillar. When we were looking at our economic strategy, it's really important to take all our stakeholders and look at our economic ecology and understand what's happening out there in our city. So working with wider members of the team, we have identified that there are 16 projects across 3 investable themes. Those themes are defence sector in Devonport, the waterfront and maritime, and the north of the city. The other theme is the city centre, and you've heard a lot about the city centre already this afternoon. It's really important to recognise that these projects are not necessarily owned, funded, or held by the council. These are all our stakeholders, public, private, third sector, but they all have significantly an impact on high-value jobs and productive growth. And they're all at various stages of development and execution. So our local economic strategy, we're still later on this month going through the process of talking to all those project managers and understanding how we monitor those projects. Given that we haven't got any, dare I say, skin in the game, this is about working in complete strategic partnership and being really honest about what's working and what's not working. So it's a dynamic process as part of our action plan execution. So just to give you a run through those projects, which are in the paperwork you have been provided. Hannah, thank you. So this is where it gets small. I need my glasses. Chair, how are we doing for time? Do you want me to go through all of them or just pick a few
As
out?
succinctly as you can. Just make a judgment call as you go.
Okay, okay. So if we look at defence sector in Devonport, it's about making sure that that 4.4 billion is spent where it can be locally. So our businesses locally benefit and are in a place where they can be in the procurement pipeline. It's about building new premises for our innovative businesses that are going to service the defence sector. So we're building those at Oceans Gate. It's about making sure that our leadership of the Southwest Defence and Security Cluster continues. We have, across the Southwest, 200 businesses that come into a room every other month and talk defence. And that's why we're starting to be recognised for being pivotal in the defence of the realm, because not just has government recognised it, but other companies from outside of the Southwest are saying, we want to be part of your cluster and part of your innovation conversations within those rooms. The Ministry of Defence has already confirmed that it will be moving its own maritime autonomous centre into the dockyard. That's really important because it means that our innovative companies working in that can talk to the people and understand their innovation needs and develop product and service aligned to the defence needs, which means, once again, that 4 billion spend stays in the city. Richard has already spoken about how the university has a bigger agenda and all the universities to play. And the assets, the knowledge, exploitation and innovation assets we have in the city are available not just to students and to graduates, but also to our businesses. So I was going around the Babbage facility, Richard, recently, and there was a number of our advanced manufacturing businesses there that were really keen to utilise that asset. And obviously, what we can't do is do the Growth Alliance Plymouth without understanding what's the skills need of the 5,500 jobs being created in Devonport, and how are our residents and workers equipped to meet that, and where do we need to upskill and reskill. Now, you'll hear more about that in another scrutiny meeting, which talks about our skills work stream. And skills is one of the underpinning, cross-cutting things across all our 4 pillars. We can't do inclusive growth, we can't do productive growth, we can't do regeneration, we can't do, what's the other, good growth and placemaking without having the right skills in the city. So that's a much bigger conversation. Looking at the waterfront and maritime, you're going to hear lots more about the free port, so I will not steal their thunder. In relation to autonomy and innovation, Richard has spoken about the Advanced Marine Technology Hub. It's fair to say that that's the city working together to say, okay, what's the next generation of asset? How does it work with our existing assets? And it's probably at feasibility stage in terms of delivery.
Yeah, very early stages, yeah.
Thank you. But we do have Smart Sound, which is that test bed for marine autonomous systems. We have companies across the globe coming and talking to us about developing their next generation of product that's under the water and testing it within our facility. And what Richard hasn't mentioned is the ACTA project at the university, which is the floating offshore wind test lab in the sea as well. So that's a £30 million project, which is awaiting funding and is in the middle of a bid process right now.
Yeah, £33 million and just been approved. Although we've not been approved, sorry, God, been approved that we submit it. We've got to talk to our board of governors. It's big, and it's a floating thing that we need to make sure doesn't float away offshore. So there's a certain amount of risk involved, but ambitious.
Maritime UK Southwest, well, that started in Plymouth. It started in the economic development team and it's now spun out and is a self-sufficient not-for-profit organisation which is supporting the innovation within our marine businesses across the Southwest. And Richard has spoken about the creation of an innovation task force. Innovation is tricky. Businesses don't understand the word innovation, but they do understand bottom line profit improvement and the need to do things quicker, faster, cheaper, better, all of that. So, and the innovation ecology is very, very complex and can be quite impenetrable to work around. So part of our work, Richard, is to make that navigation much easier, make it much clearer for that bright young or older spark who's got that innovative idea to be able to access the support, funding and everything they need to be able to make that a reality. And finally, the last page, this is about the north of the city. So our science park is going through a period of strategic alignment. The reason why Plymouth Science Park is in Derriford is to be able to align to the hospital and the innovation ecology and the research and the output there. And we're doing another realignment of that. So there was a memorandum of understanding signed recently between the city, the university and the hospital around the next generation and iteration of what that means, working in solid partnership for the science park. Once again, there was a memorandum signed by all our anchor institutions around the supply chain and spending the big institutions' money better and more locally and understanding where, if it isn't happening, why isn't it happening and how can we close that gap to make sure it happens in the future. We continue to support our key sectors, so advanced manufacturing. One of the conversations I had with Plymouth Manufacturing Group last week was this National Marine Autonomy Centre, what does that mean to us? So I said, well, let's have a conversation. Let's take you around some of the businesses at Turnchapel and let's actually understand. You can touch and feel and poke them and they can understand what you do to make those connections. I've nearly finished, Chair. Sorry, bear with me 1 second. And then we've always had a fairly invisible tech sector apart from marine and advanced manufacturing. So Plymouth Culture are leading a creative industry strategy and that's going to be published very soon because I know it's on its last iteration. And finally, when we can, Julia's team will find money to look at our startups and our entrepreneurs funding. So whenever we get the opportunity, be that shared prosperity funding or anything else, we will grab that money and make sure it lands in Plymouth and helps our next generation of startups. My last slide. So I would invite all Scrutiny members to have a look at some of the collateral that is business facing, mainly our Invest Plymouth website, but also how we sell the city, why you should invest here as a business, why you should move here and why you should stay and grow here as a business, and also look at some of the wonderful news from our businesses and what they're up to. So I've given you quite a few links there. And then to make sure it lands in your inbox, please do subscribe to our bi-weekly newsletter and make sure you're getting that proactively as well. And if you're interested in any particular fact sheet, all the fact sheets are analysed in a lot of detail, all the sectors in terms of size of the market, number of employees, GVA per job, etc., etc. So there's an invitation to have a look at some of our collateral there. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nina. It's good that you are bringing to life, as the author of the report, and passionate about this particular pillar, that you've got it all out there for us. So thank you. So we have questions from Councillor Rainsford.
I'm first. Thank you, Chair. It sort of links into the very last slide, in a sense, reasons to invest in Plymouth. We've got a stagnant population, we've got full employment, we've got a lot of job vacancies potentially coming down the line, and we need to get those people here, and therefore our transport provision, our transport gateways are absolutely essential if we're going to encourage people to think this is a great place to come and live in. So we're looking at buses, bus stations, train stations, everything associated with the waterfront. Very little mention in the papers other than loosely talking about infrastructure and transport on one of them. But it is, in my view, a very important element of encouraging and making Plymouth seem a great place to live and work and visit. There are issues up at the train station, which I raised in the previous session, that things aren't being unblocked because I think it's Network Rail are holding things up there. So could you spend some time just talk us through how important to the growth picture in Plymouth are our transport hubs? And what are we doing to ensure that they're in the right place? Not literally in the right place, but...
So I was at the GWR stakeholder conference last week in Swindon, and I sort of ambushed Lord Hendy, the rail minister, while he was there to talk about why we needed some support. I mean, as you know, the government have just unveiled a number of rail projects around the country, but I'm hoping that we can use the Defence MasterCard that we've been deploying all over the place lately. And I asked him for a meeting to talk about the reopening of Tavistock and having a railway line down from Tavistock to open what is being called in Peninsula Rail terms the Plymouth Metro. So your idea, Lauren, a little while ago for reopening a Plympton railway station or opening a new railway station for Plympton, linking Cornwall Metro to the Plymouth Metro to Ivy Bridge. Not as fanciful as it sounds. We need a couple of £1 million to do the outline business case. Only about 50 million to do the actual project, we think, at this point. And in the overall context of the defence spending, actually not that outrageous an ask. We are investing heavily in buses. This week, Councillor Stevens got up at God knows when in the morning to get on the 450 first electric bus out of Dodge. So, you know, that's an important investment in public transport, faster, cleaner, and all the rest of it. And then, of course, there's the Manadon project, which we've started a consultation on and discussions around. That's a £150 million congestion busting project at Manadon Interchange. We also received word today that the government have unblocked several projects to unblock congestion at various points, one at Marsh Mills, one in St. Peter Bypass, and one more, I can't remember where the other one was. So we're constantly on the lookout for ways in which we can improve the road network and the rail network and the bus network. The overarching problem for us will be, as I think you were hinting, we'll have a lot more people in the city centre. So how do they get to the dockyard and back? So we're working very closely with Babcock on green staff travel plans and other alternative solutions. We've also announced, I think this last, was it day before yesterday, an expansion of the park and ride at the George as well, to take a lot of cars off at the Northern Corridor at the peak. Again, these are all they might not sound very much, but actually they make an incredible difference when you add them all up together. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. In so much as it's encouraging to hear about the work the council and the team have been doing to get some of those blockages unbunged. But I just really want to reiterate how important it is if you want people to come to work and live and play in Plymouth, that we have the best possible transport options for them. So it's encouraging, but don't let go of that thought, because I think it's really important.
Councillor Gosley?
Thank you very much, Chair. Peppered through the documentation, it mentions the skills shortage. How do you evidence that skills shortage? In Plymouth, do we have a higher proportion of vacancies for highly skilled jobs than, say, other comparable areas of the country? Because what I'm trying to get at is, effectively, is the employment there? Are the employment prospects there and we're not filling them? Or is it that we lack the employment prospects? Or is it both?
So we know at the moment we're effectively at full employment. So we see it frequently that there is a bit of an arms race for certain skills in the city. So you probably know from your own experience, project managers in particular, for example, are incredibly desirable at the moment. Some of the specialist engineering skills, construction workers. So we don't have those. They don't exist. So that creates wage inflation and pressures, and we're seeing that. So we can see, a glimpse of if we don't get this right in the future, which is why this isn't a passive piece of work. You could see a situation where wages sort of get distorted by the labour market. People are poaching people all the time, and that stunts growth for businesses who want to grow. So at the moment, that's kind of where we're at. We are interrogating in great detail Babcock's information. So obviously there's a sensitivity to that, but they're forward planning about what roles they've got, what age groups they've got, what skills they've got, and where their gaps are. So there are some high level messages. They have an ageing workforce, so that's a major fundamental issue. So we know that's why they're driving their apprenticeship program so incredibly hard. But if they drive their apprenticeship program hard, we need to make sure that doesn't impact the other apprenticeships in the city. So the way I would describe what we have to do is there isn't one answer, but I would describe it like this. So we've got around 30,000 people who are not in our labour market but of working age. So there's 30,000 people who are economically inactive, and that's one of the economic pillars is around that. We call it inclusive growth or good growth. There's no solution to this unless we get a significant proportion of those people back to work, and you'll all know because you'll be involved in your communities. Those are long-term, difficult programs, moving the barriers to work. So that's a significant. And I think in the modelling around we're anticipating getting 6 to 10,000 of that group of people back into the workforce. So reskilling them, getting them into the work, that's really important. We need to encourage more of our graduates to stay here. So they need, you'll know this again, if any of you are graduates, your first graduate job, then your second, your third, you need to know there's 3 or 4 places you can go to rather than to build a long-term career. So that's part of the opportunity. In the 90s, when people came to Plymouth, and this work was a 3-year pipeline, so there was 3 years of contracts. You couldn't build a 10-year, 20-year career. So we've got to encourage the graduates to stay, and Richard may talk about that. We've got to increase the aspiration of our population so that as they go through the education system, the jobs that currently maybe they don't feel they can get or not qualified, they can reach for. And significantly, it does talk to the perception point, we need to significantly encourage people to relocate to the city and grow the city. We have to do that. And that's why the narrative here isn't just about defence, it's about culture and Destination Plymouth and marketing and branding and national National Marine Park. So in the skills strand, which I think you've got coming to Scrutiny in September, that whole detailed analysis has been done. Just commissioned a detailed labour market survey study, which has just started to report back a big piece of consultancy on the whole of that labour market, and that will form the basis of a 10-year action plan. And in the Growth Alliance, as Tudor said, innovation, skills and housing are the three major work streams. So that piece of work that Tina and Amanda Davis will lead on behalf of the city can be unpacked here in real detail in September.
Thank you very much, David. Sort of paint a picture you paint is of a cannibalistic environment in Plymouth for the higher, I suppose, skilled workforce, which is driving up wages, which is potentially making businesses less profitable because these wages are so high. So there is no such thing as really as a skills shortage. There's such a thing as a local skill shortage or a global skill shortage, but those people with those skills are out there in the country, in the world. So if this sort of competition, local competition, is driving up wages for project managers, for example, what's stopping project managers or other highly skilled workers across the country coming to Plymouth? Why? And I understand there is an issue with training. You can't necessarily take people from economically inactive all the way to, basically designing a semiconductor fabrication plant. That's one step. There's an iterative part and attracting skilled, and training people up within Plymouth. But what is stopping people coming?
I'll give you a short answer. I think Richard may want to say something as he's leading it, or maybe give a perspective or others. But I think at the moment, the pace of this change is happened really rapidly. So the number of vacancies in specialist areas, the number of apprenticeships growth in the dockyard. So whilst this space has been busy for a long time, that growth of opportunity we can track back from 2020 onwards. The impact of the Ukraine war, the spending reviews. So I think the thing that has stopped people moving to the city in the past is seeing the ability to build a longer term career with multiple large employers and multiple opportunities. And I think the change, and this is why going back to the 90s when there was a really big capital project, but it was the circus came to town and the circus left. And as Tudor explained, this circus is now going to be here for 50 years. So the opportunity now is those people who are coming in on a 3-year contract or an interim and going to leave, there's a different sell, which is come and experience Plymouth, come and bring your family up, come and have the work-life balance. But critically, and there is enough critical mass for you to take a risk on that relocation, that transition. And I think that is the fundamental shift, is the scale and the critical mass. We can go to someone who can go anywhere in the world and mobile, and we can offer them a 10-year horizon. And I don't think we could do that we couldn't do that a decade ago.
Councillor Holloway.
Thank you, Chair. There was the recent launch of the Centre for Maritime Autonomy. Fantastic news for the city. I followed its launch on social media. I saw one photo that really struck me that was posted by one of our MPs. Sea of faces all there for the launch, sort of scores and scores, if not hundreds of people there. And just 2 of the people in that room were women. One of those looked like an event organiser. So if women aren't in the room at the launch of a significant Plymouth initiative like that, where are they in the plan?
Well, I mean, the audience were pretty much exclusively people who were already here and in the room or in the city doing stuff. Or we had one woman in particular who was one of our speakers. She was talking about why she'd come to Plymouth in the first place. And me and Tracy sort of pounced on her after the event to sort of see, would you like to be the poster person for this development and what it can mean? Because she was incredibly powerful about why she'd chosen to come to Plymouth, and she could have put her business anywhere in the country. So I don't know whether it's a male-dominated environment, but it's certainly nothing that we're encouraging. And I like I say, I think the point is, the possibilities and the spin-outs from the uni and the range of careers that are going to be available in this space should suit everybody. Yeah.
We have a, I mean, I agree with you, is the short version. I mean, I think, military defence, construction, I'm in the world of property, I wince and cringe and have done for a decade. So I completely recognise that. I think it is embedded. I think it's a good challenge. Again, I would welcome Richard to be on this as well. There is a work stream around in the what we call inclusive growth, the fair growth, which is around removing those barriers, which is about role models. It's about some of the practical barriers to people accessing those opportunities, whatever they may be as well. So, I mean, I agree with you. It's embedded. Do we need to take that reflection look again? Yes, constantly, all the time. I think we just we have to keep it in our mind. Richard, did you want to say something?
Well, I just want to say I agree with you as well. I was there and it struck me as well. And I do feel quite uncomfortable when that's the way. Universities, I mean, some of the sectors, the engineering sectors as a sector struggles with this full stop. And we've got to create role models for women in STEM that can see themselves in those roles. I mean, in geosciences, for example, we have an incredibly successful Women into Geosciences program where we take women into our university and take them on a field trip. Specifically, it's an award-winning program. Now, so we need to create as many opportunities as possible. By the way, just coming back from Saudi Arabia, I know that they have more women engineers than male. I just wanted to say that because Saudi Arabia is a country that was mentioned in the modern industrial strategy. And you can see that they, despite perhaps people's perceptions, have managed to do a great job of getting women into engineering. So it's a sector-wide thing, but that's not good enough. And we've got to create opportunities and role models. And I think start very young, when kids are in school and say, I fancy being an engineer. So we do. So I can only just say I agree with you, and it's something we need to keep thinking about. The bit that worries me is, are we representative? In other words, if we're trying to create an agenda and move an agenda forwards, are we representative? And I don't think. I mean, it's deeply uncomfortable when we're not. That's all I'll say. I mean, sorry, it's not an answer to the question. It's a reflection. I think you've got a very good point.
Before I do my supplementary, does anybody else on the panel have a view?
Actually, it's not just about gender, it's about the other protected characteristics. So dare I ask the question as a person of colour, was there any coloured faces in the room? So actually some of the measurements we have around this stuff, as David has alluded to, are in our inclusive growth agenda to make sure as we grow the city, as we grow the economy, we're taking everybody from every corner with us and not leaving people behind. I know in the past, Tina Brinkworth, who heads up our post-16 skills work, has had a women in STEM group. I'm not currently sure where it sits right now, but and I know that we have charities. I'm a trustee of Millfields Inspired, and they take out young children from Stonehouse to all our sectors, and there's always a good mix in there. So we're doing some small grassroots things, and we're measuring what the current state of play is on the initiatives. I'm not sure. Does that help?
Thank you. That's really great to hear, Nina, and you're absolutely right about other groups. So we have this challenge that David and Councillor Evans outlined on, these 25,000 vacancies by 2035. That's 10 years away. I have a daughter who's 6 years old. Other councillors around this table will have children of similar ages. I mean, I'd really, perhaps this pertains to the sort of skills agenda that we'll be looking at the next committee session. I think mapping out that 10-year pipeline is going to be absolutely fundamental to make sure not just young girls that become women, but also all our young people are fully able to, that it isn't just the international project managers solely, but it's that we've got a very strong interventionist plan to make sure the children of working people in Plymouth are able to realise that. If you'll permit me, Chair, I mean, I did work experience at DML when I was 17, thought I was going to become an engineer, and was completely put off by the experience for life. And I want to know in 2025 that the world is different to what it was many, many years ago. So, yeah, I think if there's that work, I'd be really interested to see if maybe we could take away as an action how we think about that pipeline issue with the wider women in the economy work that's going on. There was a report published recently that the council did about the how women are consistently earning less in the city, and I think we're at risk of structurally locking out 50% of our population from these amazing opportunities, but you know, they have to be embedded now for them to get the benefits in 10 years' time. That was a mini speech for which I profusely apologise. I have another question, which is Richard, Mr. Davies, thank you for joining us today. We should say it's great that you've taken the time out of what I'm sure is a very busy schedule. You said that you're CEO as well as a Vice Chancellor. I'd be really keen to understand that and how that fits into this model. Myself, Councillor Ricketts, represent a ward with many students. We serve those students, you serve your students. How would you say, if you were sort of communicating something to those students who are thinking about future job opportunities, what would you say to them directly about how the pillar that you're working on, what that means for them in real concrete terms?
Okay, so CEO, many Vice-Chancellors are not called Vice-Chancellor and CEO, it's just Vice-Chancellor. I quite like the tagline CEO, which is true, because it explains to many people the role I have, which is the Chief Executive Officer. But usually in most universities, you just call me Vice-Chancellor and you drop the CEO bit. But I am responsible for 265 to 70 million turnover university. So I'm responsible to the government, etc., to do that well. Yeah, so, you know, I walked around town with my two nephews, one who's 15 and one who's 17, yesterday afternoon. Took them down for fish and chips just at the Barbican. And my 15-year-old nephew said, I want to study marine biology at Plymouth. As we walked out, and this is what I say to students generally, not just to, I said, we're different. We're not a normal city and we're not a normal university. If you want to go to something that sort of sits in the average, you've got lots of cities you can go to. Let's go to Birmingham, go to Sheffield, you can go to the major conurbations. When you come here, this is very different. This is not average. And you know, the students, I think, get that once they've been here. So I don't have to tell them, they get that. But for prospective students, and we were just actually doing some work on positioning us as a university within our city and for students. And this is something that feels very authentic. We're not ordinary, okay? We're really not ordinary. So for students, what we offer as a university is hands-on experience in our law clinic, in the ocean, on the rocks if you're studying earth sciences. And when you're here, it is not a normal experience. It's a long way from many other cities, and it is gritty, and it is full of contradictions, and it's got this fantastic environment. I also do believe we've got a fantastic offer going forwards in terms of jobs. We don't know what all those jobs are going to be. There's a lot of guessing as to what we sort of know quite a lot, but what we know about the employment market is there are jobs that haven't been invented yet, that those people will need to be nimble enough to move across during their career. Those are the sorts of conversations we have with students about this being a different and not an average city. It's quite an extraordinary place to be. And I think students who've been here get it. We can't keep all of them here, and that's one of the challenges, is keeping them here in the city to take on these roles. And I think we need to meet 15, 16-year-olds like my nephew and say, this is a start of a journey. You come here, here's the role, here's the employer. We have a mentoring scheme that's very effective. We have 400 mentors from businesses working with students to say, what's your CV look like? How about an offer, a role in this organisation that I can introduce you to? And we also have ambassadors that we can use to go out and talk to women and poor white boys who perhaps don't see themselves in universities. And those ambassadors, Craig Moore's got a project that he's been talking about, and we've offered our ambassador students. Our students often have come through really rocky, tenuous paths to come to university. Really difficult paths. And they've got a story to tell to 9 and 10-year-olds, and we want to use that as well. So they're much better at telling the story than I am, because I'm 57 and middle-aged and the rest of it. Okay, so the students are great ambassadors for us in doing that translational piece. But those are the sorts of things we're talking about. I hope that partially helps or maybe answers your question.
Thank you. I did have a question, but I'm conscious of time, so we'll just get Councillor McCarthy in at the end and finish off there.
Thank you. Very quick one. I've been unusually quiet because I sing from the same hymn sheet as you all. Something personally I'm very passionate about. So I studied marine sciences at Plymouth, and I'm 40, I've seen many of my peers leave. And interestingly, many of them are in really fascinating, interesting jobs all over the world. So that piece about retention that David spoke to, I feel that's so very, very important. There's huge opportunity, and we've talked many a time around turning our back on the ocean, and defence and marine. The opportunity it offers us is huge. It all sounds so fantastic, and I guess my question would be, are there any trip hazards or obstacles you can see at this point that we can try to navigate? 50 years is a long time, so I guess we've got some cushioning. But how do we get past that? And the supplementary that I'd ask on to that would be, you're talking about vast sums of data streams and information. And I know, there's the recruitment process of a new digital director, and there'll be a component of that role that will look at AI. And I just wonder, with the areas that you're talking about at this point, to me, it very much feels, with my day job hat on, that this is a real opportunity to have a foundational model that actually looks at pulling these insights together, supporting the great work that Lauren and the team are doing, but can actually then start to deliver insights beyond our expectations.
Okay. So I've seen lots of things come and go over this period of time, and for the last decade, everything was really hard fought. We were incredibly successful in these economic competitions. We got everything. We got Freeport, we got Levelling Up Fund, we got Future High Streets Fund, we got Growth Deal 1, Growth Deal 2, Growth Deal 3, you name it. Hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds. And at the moment, we've got £100 million washing through. That's all changed. So there's now a different conversation, which is about, are you a national opportunity? Are you nationally significant? It's not about competitions anymore. And what I've seen done, I'm sort of more in the delivery space than the advocacy space. But what I've seen the city do, led by obviously its political leadership, but Tracy, Richard, the Naval Base Commander, is take that pitch to government in a coherent way I've not seen before, at a scale and visibility I've not seen before, and then establish governance at the beginning that has longevity. And the amounts of money that are being asked for of government to invest in these spaces, they're not like we 10 million here and 10 million there, which is where we've been for the past decade. They are hundreds of millions over long sustained times, which requires a different approach to governance and a different approach to the way of doing things. So my starting point is, this isn't being added to people's day jobs. It's not been thought about as business as usual. There's a city governance that is new. The leaders of the city are aligned. So I think that's the starting point. And the fact that Richard's here, sitting next to Tudor, that we wouldn't have been doing that 5 years ago. So there's a single purpose. And we're tooling up. That's my sense. We're really tooling up. Whereas what we might have done in the past is, we'll just add that project to someone's day job, and that project to a day job. And our ambition, in terms of the conversation I'm in with government about the conversation I've had with government, have been, to me, we want to talk to cities that their ambition is faster and a scale that you didn't think was possible. So I've been encouraged to think about asks that I'm like, well, that much? Really? Is that possible? So it seems to me, at least, there's a different opportunity. But I mean, in terms of it might be quite a good, and the data point, I totally agree. And the skills bit's super important. We're starting off with the modelling. There's a huge amount of modelling being done in data to start, and I think that'll be good. But I mean, certainly, I mean, Tudor may want to talk about the lobbying and Richard, but that's my sense. There's a different city leadership piece that I don't think we've had for some time. That'd be my sense.
I just want to add, I mean, I totally agree with you, and this is a very important point for me. I've made it absolutely clear that the University of Plymouth is in Plymouth and wants to be a strong civic contributor for all sorts of reasons. It's partly my personal view of that this is what universities do. So it is intrinsic to what I said on day one, 1st of October, day one in the university. I think through partnership, we will do bigger and better things and we'll have more impact. And we de-risk, we get better solutions. So I think we have to have a consistent narrative. And I think we need to tell the story in slightly different ways. So you could use the word defence, but you could start to talk about security. You could talk about resilience. And I think for different audiences, there may be different ways of exciting them. And sometimes in the university, I might not just come out and say defence. I might say, this is a theme that involves defence, but it's also about understanding coastal regions, etc., because we're developing technologies that can be used in many ways in the future.
I think it's important to say, you know, one thing around security, for example, energy security, so the Celtic Sea, a defendable space to have our floating offshore wind in, compared with more exposed sites elsewhere around the UK, for example. But I think it's right. It's to use the old catchphrase, it's the way we tell them. And, you know, there is a great story to tell here. We're not inflating anything here, actually. Our problem is sometimes just to close your eyes and imagine what else we could be doing in this space. I've been to meetings in Babcock for 30 years where they drew a graph and it was like a camel. It had 2 humps. And they used to show us this every year. This is their work stream at the moment. This is how it will be in 5 years' time. And then this is how it will be in 10 years' time. And for the last, I don't know how many years, and this predates Babcock, this goes back to DML days, the work streams for the dockyard were so cyclical, right, that you couldn't plan right. Now, what's happening now is every time Barrow pushes out a submarine, right, that's work stream for Plymouth 30 years down the track. It's really important to recognise this, that what is about to happen to us in black boats and in grey boats is unprecedented in modern times. And our challenge has got to be, and this is why we started the Olympic bid, why we started the Plymouth Growth Alliance project in the first place, is that we're desperately keen for this to be a benefit. So, you know, going back to what Jeremy was hinting at, you know, there is a possibility that if we didn't do what we're doing, this could cannibalise everything. We've spent 20 years diversifying the economy of Plymouth because in the 80s, it was really rough for us when defence went down. What we do know now is that we're in different times. And actually, we've got to go and love defence again in a way that we used to. Security. We can have confidence in that simply because the new ships are going to be a project for us for decades to come. We know this now, and that's something we haven't been able to say in the very recent past.
David,
just desperate
how
to
can
give a
I say
practical
no
example.
when you're turning your
Okay,
computer around to show me pictures?
This is a practical example. This is in the UK Defence Journal, announced yesterday, which is Helsing. The headline is Helsing to build drone submarine factory in Plymouth. They landed on our door about 3 months ago. We spoke to them at length, was passed to us by, actually through the Defence Select Committee. They'd heard the National Central Autonomy. They wanted to bid for defence. They're a civilian contractor as well, defence. So actually they're bringing AI and autonomous systems knowledge to solve defence problems. And they've just headquartered in Plymouth. And there are 4 other businesses we're talking to like this that have landed in our lap. in the last 3 months, which gives a sense of the practical impacts of this stuff.
Brilliant, thank you. Really appreciate it. We've added an extra meeting in this year to get perfect synergy with economic development, with the 4 pillars. So we're going to be well versed as a panel, underpinned by skills. So we have 5 meetings with those 5 areas, which is brilliant. I think that will align with everything you're doing. Really appreciate all your efforts today. Richard especially, fantastic to have you from the university.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you very much, everyone. And look, fantastic questions. Probing. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you for being here next to the leader of the council. That's fantastic. And as a university graduate myself, I would love to see the university be at the heart of things. So thank you. Without further ado, we'll go on to the final agenda item, which is about the Freeport. If we can, we must leave this room by 5 o'clock because people have got families and homes to go to. If everyone can be aware of that, that would be great. Sorry? If you want to stay longer than 5, then I was just. I believe we have in the situations that we've had and the agenda we've had. We've done everything good justice. There's a number of options we can do in these situations. We can defer it to another meeting. I was just putting out there, it'd be nice to finish by 5, but. Is it, Ian, will you be taking us away on this one? This is an annual item, by the way, that we receive as an annual report. So we are quite well versed in it as a panel. We had it next year. This is an update.
I think leader's going to say a few intro words.
Just got a few words for you, Chair. So it has been a really good year for the Freeport. Our first year was all about setup and mobilisation. Our second year was all about allocating and spending the £25 million grant that we got. And this year is all about investment and jobs. So Ian's going to share all the amazing work the Freeport's doing. Is Jan online as well? Not sure.
She is.
Yes, I'm here, but I do have to go at 5, I'm afraid.
Okay, well, I'll be really quick, Jan, I promise.
Okay.
I need to say a couple of things. So the Freeports will continue under the new government. But there's going to be a transition of them into what they're calling industrial strategy zones. That's basically to ensure that the Freeports are joined up with the UK's new industrial strategy. We'll hear more about that in due course, I dare say. But what it does mean for us, of course, is that the Freeport's going to be even more integrated with the work that we're doing with the Growth Alliance on defence and security. It will remain a major plank of economic strategy. So probably going to steal Ian's thunder here, but we have done a lot over the last 12 months. Do you want to say, you've got a list of those things? Because I don't want to repeat them.
Go for it.
I'll go for it.
Yeah.
So Freeport contributed £1.3 million seed funding to the Council's £23 million investment partnership with ABP to transform Mill Bay docks, providing new facilities to support export growth. The Freeport has also supported the widening of the Catwater Harbour to attract larger and greener vessels. Plymouth is now formally recognised as a potential flow port by Crown Estate. Hurrah! We have secured planning for our Oceans Gate Innovation Barn and will shortly be starting on site. The Freeport provided funding to enable Princess Yachts to expand their South Yard operation. We've almost completed our direct development at the Freeport in Beaumont Way. The Sherford employment lands being secured by Freeport funding is now complete. This means that we've secured one of the most important employment sites in the city, and we're working closely with Babcock and the MOD to support their growth ambitions for South Yard. Now, our Freeport is and always has been about additionality, delivering on the city's long-term vision. And now with recent announcements on defence we have an even greater opportunity to attract business expansion and inward investment. So I'm really excited about what Freeport is doing. Can't wait to see the presentation. Over to you.
Thanks, Julia. Yeah, so I've prepared a few slides and a 10-minute overview. I'll go through as quickly as I can, conscious of time, and then Jan and I are more than happy to answer any questions that I'm sure you'll have. So great introduction, Tudor. I'll touch on some of that in a bit more detail. And thank you to the panel today for our third annual update, would you believe? It's great to have this opportunity. Ahead of the session, we circulated our annual report for this current financial year 24-5. The report covers some of the key milestones that have been achieved over the past year, including our work to position Langage as an investable tax site, the Council's direct developments within the Freeport, our sponsorship of initiatives such as the Marine Tech Accelerator Programme, and Babcock's skills-based work academy collaboration with the Council and DWP. This report is published on our website and is done so to showcase to the public the great work that our Freeport is doing on behalf of the city to enable growth. However, the report does not cover the government announcement that was made recently, as Tudor highlighted, that places Freeports under the banner of industrial strategy zones as part of the government's 10-year strategy to achieve economic growth. It's this development that forms the central theme of the update I've got for you today. Yeah, that's the right, no, previous. Sorry, I didn't know you'd gone there. Thanks. So the industrial strategy has identified 8 key growth sectors, which include the Freeport gateway sectors of defence, clean tech and advanced manufacturing, plus the Freeport's other target sectors of marine and space, which have obvious alignment. Our Freeport is therefore mission ready to deliver against central and local government growth priorities. We are not siloed at all. We are an embedded agenda tasked with helping accelerate the Council's growth agenda for the city. Next slide, please. For example, as the only defence-focused industrial strategy zone, we are contributing to Growth Alliance Plymouth priorities. Notably, we have worked in support of the Council's ask of government to invest in a 10-year programme of work that will develop new technologies and capabilities for marine autonomy. And we've recently commissioned a marine autonomy research project in collaboration with Council colleagues to ensure that the industry is listened to and engaged with in this work. Next slide, please. This supportive mission-led approach is geographically focused on our 3 tax sites at Southyard, Langage and Sherford, plus the ports of Plymouth. All are included within the Plymouth and West Devon Joint Local Plan as strategic employment sites, and all have received significant support in the form of Freeport seed capital funding. Next slide, please. £25 million from the UK government has been matched locally by over £47 million to support national and local economic growth priorities in defence, clean tech, and our other gateway sectors. Our 12 seed capital projects are all in flight now, with 3 projects completed and a further 2 projects on track for completion by the end of 2025. They range from port optimisation and land assembly to infrastructure improvements and this Council's 2 direct developments, all geared to establish 3 investable tax sites at Southyard, Langage and Sherford. Next slide, please. At Langage, this includes a 2-phase spine road, which will unlock 24 hectares of employment land south of Langage Power Station. Construction of the first phase is underway and will complete by the end of 2025, providing access to plots 7 and 8. We're also supporting the landowner Carlton Power provide an access road into plot 2 and power connection to plots 2 and 3. And notably to the south at Beaumont Way, the council's direct development is making swift progress. Next slide, please. Devon contractors remain on track to complete all 4 units by the autumn, with much activity taking place in June and July, as you can see from the slide. 15 weeks remain of this 45-week programme, and special mention must go to the council's Robert McGuffey for steering the project with such skill and positive impact. Next slide, please. Indeed, it is a testament to this council's procurement approach and the ability of Devon contractors to deliver that social value and engagement targets have been met and in some cases exceeded, including 7 work placements completed, 4 new jobs created, and 145 training weeks provided to date. Next slide, please. Good growth also means clean growth, and the Freeport is delivering on that front too. Carlton Power has now signed the hydrogen allocation round 1 contract with the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. A final investment decision is expected soon, and if positive, will result in a multi-million-pound production facility of green hydrogen, the first of its kind in the southwest, being built at Langage from next year. The Freeport has supported this project by commissioning an off-taker demand study for the region, which identified the fast-moving consumer goods sector as the likely early adopter of green hydrogen. And as a result, off-take negotiations with Carlton Power are now ongoing with an international dairy operator in the region. Importantly, the study also forecast demand from the marine sector, including defence, from the mid-2030s, highlighting alignment with future strategic defence growth. Next slide, please. Our early wins reported last year exemplified growth in both defence and wider marine, coupled with the leadership of this council in directly developing the final phase of Oceans Gate to match property supply with the growing demand for space near to the dockyard. As the only UK Freeport with behind-the-wire tax site space and focus on defence, we're primed to enable strategic investment and support the clustering of businesses around key anchor activity. Next slide, please. Activity such as the National Centre for Marine Autonomy. The Freeport is working in support of this defence growth agenda by advising on the optimisation of landowner investments in critical infrastructure and marketing space suitable for investment across the Freeport. Next slide, please. Notably, our partners in South Hams recently completed the purchase of the Sherford tax site using Freeport seed capital, thereby securing this crucial employment land for defence use. The Sherford Consortium will accelerate now its delivery of key infrastructure to support the intended end user's timeline. Starting on site in September, they will undertake a programme with support of £1.2 million of Freeport seed capital, which will include an access road, utilities and earthworks to level the land, ready for development by the end user, who intends to buy the land from South Hams under a 12-month option agreement and deliver a capability by 2028. Next slide, please. As well as the successful completion of the Sherford Land Assembly project, Babcock recently announced its intention to invest further in the Freeport. The Freeport South Yard tax site became home to a jackal production facility last year. Now, the company is looking to extend its footprint within the Freeport by establishing an integrated logistics hub and advanced manufacturing facility. Next slide, please. While defence is our core sector focus, we're also keeping open opportunities for aligned activity in industrial strategy areas such as clean tech, particularly floating offshore wind, aka flow. The Crown Estate announced earlier this year that Port Talbot and Bristol will play a key role in the delivery of flow turbines into the Celtic Sea. Plymouth was named also, in the same announcement as having a potential role to play in a supportive capacity. And we as a Freeport, with council colleagues, will continue to keep the city on the radar for appropriate opportunities that do not detract from our core focus on defence. Next slide, please. This focus will be demand-driven. We'll continue to work with developers to catalyse tax site development that will match supply and property to the growing demand. Notably, we are supporting talks between one Freeport landowner and a commercial property developer to agree a joint venture that will create a development structure for Langage. In driving local growth, we will provide advice and support to the likes of Babcock as it embarks on its creation of a logistics hub and advanced manufacturing space. And we will continue reaching out and engaging with new businesses wishing to secure suitable facilities proximate to anchor initiatives such as the Centre for Marine Autonomy and Langage Green Hydrogen. And indeed, Helsing's announcement that David flagged just a moment ago to create an underwater drone factory at Langage is the start of things to come and demonstrates the impactful work of this council in attracting inward investment to the city. And we will also look to further cement our strategic partnerships to ensure that the Freeport programme remains embedded in the city's agenda for growth. Thanks very much. And as I say, Jan and
Thank you, Ian.
here to answer any
I wasn't
questions.
expecting that, but it's happened, and thank you. I appreciate it. It was a very lengthy slide presentation, so thank you. Jan, I'm conscious of your time. You've got 10 minutes for us. You don't have to use it all, so if you can come in there, it'd be great.
Okay, yes, thanks very much. I think you've probably got the detail now of where we've got to. We spent quite a lot of time on Monday talking with colleagues about where we're going to. I think one of the big factors is the new strategy within the industrial strategy on taking the free ports further in and adding enterprise zones to an umbrella governing body. We're not quite sure how this is going to work yet. It's all very new. We did have an MHCLG colleague there who was sort of just giving us indications of where they think this might go. But one of the things that I think is really interesting, within the industrial strategy, it says that they have a £600 million fund that could be tapped into. And for me, that's a very, very big part of making sure that we make this work. A lot of the other free ports are having problems with it. As I understand, I bring together, I chair up the Chairs Forum for free ports across the country. And we are pretty unique, to be honest, in terms of the gateway that we have and the fact that our chosen strategy in terms of sectors matches almost identically with a range of strategies in the government's sectors that they're targeting. So it's clear that the free ports are a priority for the government, and I'm also very keen to make sure that we stay that way. I think the other thing that's interesting for me is also that the free port doesn't just complement what the Plymouth City Council does. It's making an impact across the region, I feel. And it's making Plymouth very prominent in the regional diaspora, I suppose you could call it. And I'm finding that it's been a very, very useful way for Plymouth to promote itself. I think the other point that I'd like to make specifically would be on the gap. We are very keen to make sure that we aren't duplicating work across the city. We need to make sure that we are, as David's pointed out, the additionality that the Freeport brings is really important. So for me, one of the things that we want to try to make sure we do in the future is that our partnership within the gap and how we contribute to it is additional. And it's not something that we're bringing additional, duplicated effort to. So that's a very important part of the work that we're starting to do now, in terms of trying to make sure that across the city there is a good set of cooperations. I'll leave it there because we've only got 5 minutes, and I'm sure people have got questions.
Thank you, Jan. Councillor Sproston.
Yeah, I'll make it quick. Just want to say how fantastic I think all this is, and if I had more time, I would shower you with a lot of praise. But I just had one concern that I just wanted to kind of pick up on. Last time we had kind of some questions to Freeport, I mentioned about small medium enterprises. I saw in the report under skills on page 9, it said ready to fill vacancies to the Freeport partnered with local SMEs, which was brilliant for it to be seen in there. I was just wondering if I could get some more detail on like who these are, how many they are. This doesn't have to be answered now. Given the time we've got, I'd quite happily take this information at another time. But I was just excited to see, and I just wanted a bit of follow-up on that, if that's possible.
Grateful for you offering a follow-up after. I've noted that down. I'll certainly do that and get it circulated via democratic support to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Could I just quickly say, you have hit on one of my passions, which is SMEs, because I was an SME when I first started my business a long time ago, and it is absolutely top priority in my eyes to create jobs through the growth of SMEs. So brilliant question. I really love the fact that you're interested in that.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Kevin. Councillor Goslin.
Thank you very much, Chair. I noticed in the report it says that half of the South Yard Ocean Gates units have been pre-let. Given that the main aim of the Freeport is to attract in investment and skilled employment, how optimistic are you that all of those, I suppose, units, both in Ocean's Gate and Beaumont Way, will be let when they are complete by 2026?
So I think I'm really confident, and actually I think we've got a different problem, which is we're not going to have enough at the pace we need it. So I think that the city council has been pretty much, with actually one other developer, the only provider of industrial units over the last decade, because the private sector, for reasons that are well understood, only build generally the pre-let in advance. So the way employment line works is when a business wants to grow, they don't give you a month's notice or 12 months notice. They go, right, we need to grow now, and they turn to the premises. So I think we're back in the build it and they'll come phase for a period of time, which I think, our ability to direct development was limited by the big inflation and cost inflation spikes, where for the first time we couldn't do them without some grant funding. So the last one, the Beaumont Way one's the only industrial development we've done that's required the grant funding to make it viable. So that the Freeport being there was valuable. But I think it's a different question, which is, I think everything we're building will be let. We're getting pre-lets before we've even started on the ground for some of these units. So I think the challenge is a different one, and that's why the Sherford employment land is so important. It used to be bitty all over the housing, so it was in a little bit here, a little bit there. It was consolidated, and then the housing developers are brilliant at building houses, but more often than not, the employment, it's not something they do. They see it as a difficulty. It's often a Section 106 obligation. So to get such a big piece of land on the A38 is a game changer, and to be that in the public control, and to give you a sense of the footprint we can put on that, it is all, well, it's hundreds of thousands of square feet footprints in individual units. We can't say the option that was alluded to, we can't say what that is at this point, but it wouldn't be a big guess. So that's the question. Yes, they'll be let, but we need more, is what we need, because otherwise that will slow us down like schools will.
Final question, Councillor Holloway.
Thank you. Just looking at the financials in your annual reports, note that, as we know, that the proposition is that partnership between Plymouth City Council, Devon County Council, South Hams. Devon County Council is given 8.5 million in some of the seed funding allocation. South Hams District Council gave 3.7 million for tax site 3. How much do conversations and plans around local government review and the location of those sites in Langage and Sherford, how much does the local government review affect the sort of future partnerships around that kind of fundamental business case underlying the Freeport?
Well, actually, I mean, the changes that the government you alluded to are actually more to do with, less to do with LGR, more to do with combined authorities. The government's kind of keen now that Freeports and enterprise zones are folded into mayoral strategic combined authorities. So I think we're still kind of working our way through, I mean, as the legislation is about to drop, but we haven't got the final details on this. You know, some of this will be outside the tax site, but it'll be in the clutches of the soon-to-be larger Plymouth City Council, I hope. I think to answer your question, I think we need to sort of wait and see what that consultation on the future management of enterprise zones and Freeports is before I can give you a definitive answer to that question. We're out to consultation on this at the moment, so the government haven't exactly decided, but they've already given an indication of the direction of travel on this. I'm not sure whether I like it, simply because we've been used to having quite a central role to this, and obviously in a combined authority terms, pushes us back into a much larger and wider conversation with more partners. But we'll have to see. But I think the answers won't be long coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Tudor and the team. That was great. That's bringing us to a close. I would not, I know.
We've got
two
two
of
more
them,
agenda
not at a
items.
close. We're moving towards a close. We have the work programme there, if everybody's happy with it. We're obviously following the path of pillars. We have 5 meetings, 5 pillars basically. I think it's very strategic and the right thing to do. If you're happy with that, we'll proceed. I'm looking forward to the next meeting.
Are we aware when the site visit might be in August? See people with children and work commitments.
So I will contact everyone after the meeting, but yesterday we were able to confirm that it will be the 15th of August, and I will circulate all the information needed and the timings and everything after the meeting.
Is a further suggestion of another site visit in September?
I am hopeful to have a date by the end of the week. I will let you know as soon as I can.
Council, I've been pushing on this because last year I said let's go to Tinside, it never happened. So I'm in and I want to make these things happen. It's extra enrichment for the board, for the committee.
With how much we've kind of ran over and not been able to scrutinise the last thing, do we feel that we have a balance on our agendas, and are they going to continue to overrun? Do we need to better time manage or extend the meeting to ensure that we're able to scrutinise? Because I don't feel that was the ability to actually scrutinise that agenda item.
That's your opinion. I mean, I think it was a very good meeting, and I think that that was a particularly extended item on the Freeport with the slide intervention we had.
We stuck 2 agenda items together. Luckily, we were able to do that. But that one, they weren't even able to answer Kevin's question, and they're going to come back to Kevin. So I don't know that there was enough time.
I think there was one question. I mean, I've been in these meetings for years. There was one question where they're going to get back to us after the meeting. Normally, there's a few of those scenarios. I take your point.
Chair, can I make a recommendation which might help the timing issues on previous committees? We go into these scrutiny committees with the assumption that everyone has read their papers, which means that it's not necessary for officers to make 15-minute presentations, which take up a lot of time. The whole idea of these committee meetings is us to ask them questions, not for us to be talked at for half of the meeting. So what I made on a previous committee that I vice-chaired is that we make the assumption that, you know, we've all done our homework and it's a flipped meeting, and that we make a recommendation that the presentations given for each agenda item do not last more than 5 minutes. So that gives us more time to ask questions.
I'm with you, okay? I'm with you. We will all reflect, I'll reflect, okay? We've had a 2 o'clock meeting that's basically finished at 5 o'clock. That's pretty standard. I think it's been a really good session. The flow has been what I want to see. But yeah, we'll take those points back. We've got the work programme, we've got the site visits where we're going to get back to you on for the extra enrichment. We'll ensure that those happen. Anything else, Hannah?
Agenda item 10.
The action log, how are we looking on that?
So through you, Chair, it's just to let you know that the last 3 actions did go to Cabinet on Monday. I do have updates on all 3 of those that I will share, but obviously they weren't able to go out with the agenda pack because the Cabinet meeting happened after we'd published. So it's just to let members know that those will be closed shortly. And if appropriate, I don't know if you wanted to...
If you want to, Glenn will stay around for a period of time if you want to check in with Glenn. Glenn's obviously taken over the Anthony Payne position. He will be here. If you want to talk to him, I'll be checking in with him as well. So hope you enjoyed the meeting, Glenn.
Could I ask a question about Jan, who was on screen? I didn't know who she was, and I'm not sure the public looking in necessarily would, because she didn't seem to have a sort of explanatory caption. Is that something we can look at?
Fair point from the public's perspective. Yeah, Jan was the chair of the Freeport.
Well, it's us as well. I don't know if any questions would be relevant to her.
Yeah.
So we need to know who.
Fair one. Fair one. It's always tricky sometimes when they're not actually in the room, but yeah, take your point. With all that being said, I think that was an excellent meeting. Thank you for your time.